the City of Oneida Common Council for the purpose of discussion and hopefully development of the budget for 2022, along with a plan to how we're going to spend the first installment, which is 50% of the American Rescue Plan funds which the city has been awarded. So we move call to order. Let's all rise and do the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to call the roll?
Mayor Herseth?
Here.
Councilmember Murphy?
Here.
Councilmember Davies?
Here.
Councilmember Ritzberger?
Here.
Councilmember LaFarge? Here. Councilmember Carson?
Here.
Councilmember Bennington?
Here.
Councilmember Rutherford?
Here.
Councilmember Dutton?
Here.
Okay, everybody's here. So we're going to do the ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act, first. Just to give you a little background, I think everybody is pretty much aware. The city was awarded approximately $1.4 million to be spent under the American Rescue Plan Act. It's not just a blank check to spend any way that you want or put in the bank. There are very specific ways in which the money can be spent, and it must be spent. It can't be put in the bank. It needs to replace depleted reserves. So Ginny will be presenting a draft plan in a little while, and then we'll open up the discussion. But we have here today representatives of the Future of Oneida Foundation and the Susquehanna Greenway Association, who are here to talk about a request for inclusion of funding for a project that they have been working on and are very passionate about. And they asked if they could address the council with it, and I said they certainly could. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Chris Kuhn, who is the chair, president, all of the above,
Yes.
of the Future of Oneida Foundation.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor. Most people know me as the director of Job Corps, and wear this jacket so people won't forget. But we received the Organization of the Year Award in 2012, I think it was. And then shortly after that, I was asked to be part of the board. So I guess that's how it works, but it worked. And a few years later, I became the president, and we've had a pretty good existence in terms of funding projects in the city. But then along came Al Kleiman, and he wanted to do bigger things, and I thought that sounded really cool. So the first thing we took a look at was the pathways, because every urban area has beautiful pathways and people use them. And here you've got the Susquehanna River, the third oldest in the world, and really no riverfront place to walk. Even if you get a be part of that canoe race, you've got to go through weeds and get ticks on you and everything. There really isn't any great spot. So we thought that would be our first start. So we looked up Donna Boulder and Sandy and Charlie. I don't know their last names.
Bright shine.
Okay. And they had been working on this for a long, long time. So we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. We just decided, hey, what do they need? What can we do to help as a foundation? And they said, well, there's a certain pathway that's right behind Demansky Field. And if we got that started, we could really kick it off. So that's what we decided to fund. And I can show you a few pictures of what we're talking about. All right. So you're holding it?
Try now.
I can never go without showing pictures, but pictures are always cool.
Okay. So,
Are you able to do it from there?
That's what I was trying, it's not showing the users. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. The key here is Future of Oneida Foundation you know, things are changing. People give money in different ways. I think they do more so now because of, you know, exciting projects they want to be part of, rather than just giving to an organization to make their own decisions on where the money should go. We're all on the future. Click. Okay. Bird's eye view of Newell Park. Kind of looked at this with Barry. I don't know, maybe you originally didn't know the next map, but in addition to dog parks and other things going on at the park, we want to create a trail that's basically, what do we call that area?
Mill race.
The mill race, okay, the mill race behind the stadium. And then we'd also join along David Brenner Road, which there's a path there now, but then it would stretch along basically the biking trail that goes from the kiosk along Lettuce Highway, or at least below Lettuce Highway, to the new island. So go ahead, click. This gives you a little bit better idea. Did you do this? Okay, I figured. Okay, so you can see where the pathway would be, the red line. Now, of course, we want to do something a little bit more impactful. The broad vision is to create a trailway all the way from the Susquehanna Greenway to Fortran Park, and it would include a bridge. I mean, you see, again, it seems like a big deal, but you go to any urban area and you have those things. But we need to start, and this is where we're going to start. And we are willing to give 50 grand of FOF money and put it with the funding that the mayor was talking about. Click. There's Al Kleiman. He's already figuring out how much square feet is needed for the pathway. And, you know, I describe him as the guy like an EpiPen. You know, he was an EpiPen right in the thigh of FOF. Okay. Click. This is the park by the mill race. It's a real nice little trail, but we want to make it accessible to all. You know, wheelchairs, baby buggies, you name it. Click. This is the other part. It's along the Lettuce Highway section. Job Corps several years ago put up kiosks on the beginnings of some of the bike trails around the community. And this is one area. So people get on their bikes, they ride this and kind of do the little tricky thing underneath I-88 and then go to New Island. So we walk the whole thing, and that's Al with Frank Russo. This is over an old railroad bridge. There's a lot of details in terms of what we can do and what we have to do in terms of taking down bridges and things like that. But the point is, you've got land here that is currently being used by a lot of mountain bikers. I mean, it's beautiful down there. It was a great walk that day, but we could make it accessible to all, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Click. I'm taking some pictures. I like, that's actually the best part of the trail, is going over that little bridge. Click. And this is kind of at the end where it hits the railroad tracks, and they had ideas to even continue it farther. Again, the sky's the limit in terms of where you want to do it, but we're here, Future Oneonta Foundation, just to get this thing started. I believe, I'm fully confident that once you get a pathway, you are going to have people asking for it to continue other places. And as the mayor suggested, which I hadn't thought of it, is even connected with Wilbur Park and beyond. So actually up into the hills instead of just along the river. But so these pictures here are just pictures I took off the internet of other pathways. You can see they just add. This is something that people take for granted almost now because they're so accessible, but not here in Oneonta. Click again. Beautiful. I bought a bike during the pandemic, and I've been riding piece by piece through the Empire Trail, the Erie Canal Trail. It's been really nice. Click. This is all we're talking about, nothing more. Click. You know, I also think too is, you know, I always see the runners from SUNY and Hartwick running up and down hills, and I know that's really great training and all. And I know Dave likes to climb all the mountains up in Adirondacks, but you know, many people like flat areas, and you don't really have that in Oneonta unless you're dealing with traffic. And I really think that's necessary to have a nice long, you know, 5, 7, 10-mile trail that people can go and run. And I guarantee you, if you had that, you'd see groups of runners all the time. It would add to recruitment for the colleges. It would just be good. Click. You build it and they will run. Click. And click. Yeah, it's pretty cute. That was a good job. And click. So that's really it. I don't need to go any more detail. It's an easy sell. And I just think this is time to really kind of put our stake in the ground and say, this is something we want to do to make Oneonta better. We have other ideas, an enhanced farmer's market, a bandstand in the main park on Main Street for Jerry Lee Walker. Jeff Walker. Let's start on that. Anyway, but this is the first thing, and this is the most important thing. So that's all I've got, unless Donna or Sandy or Charlie want to add anything.
You pretty well covered it, but I mean, this is something, especially the park in Naywell Park, has been on the Parks Comprehensive Plan for at least a decade, maybe more. It's time to do it now. When people need the escape, they're looking for these things. It's just waiting to happen.
Questions from any of the council?
That's actually the question. Thank you for the presentation. I love the ideas and the trail system in the park. Actually, it's been on the parks plan for about 10 years. The question's for Greg. Greg, do we have any cost figured out on putting that trail system in Neowon?
What Chris just outlined,
Right,
we're estimating about $150,000.
and that would be along Mill Race. And then what surface are we talking about going along Lenz Highway, which is currently part of the mountain bike, the beginning of the mountain bike trail?
It would be an asphalt path the whole way. The entire stretch that was highlighted red on those maps would be asphalt. I think along the Lettuce Highway section, Catella Park, we're gonna go 8 foot wide with water, so there's room for bikes and people open out.
Are we talking about removing trees over there? Because there's a lot
No, I
of
think we would-
surface roads.
We'd have to kind of snake a path through there one way or another, maybe to the side of it. We try to obviously limit or avoid any tree removal.
Will that cause any issues for the kind of edge of the soccer fields right there? They really push up too close to that trail.
I think there's enough room. Just need to find it without impacting them, maybe. I think we'd be room to shift them a little bit if they had to.
Financially, from what I understand, FOF is pledging $50,000 towards this.
Right.
Which is very, very generous. And the request is that we put $100,000 of our ARPA funds, which we're going to talk more about as we go forward, towards this project as well, so that it can take place this spring.
Thanks. So with regard to funding, this is something that I think is great. I would love to see it go out all the way to Thornton Park. I've done New Island with my son in the stroller, and it was like,
Yeah, that'd be tough.
so I think that this is great. I guess my question is just more a process question. Because I am also on the Parks and Rec Commission, and at the initial sort of pitch of this to Parks and Rec, FOF had insinuated that they might, or that you might be able to fund the entire project. And so I'm just wondering what the change is there. Not that I don't think that the city has a responsibility to assist in the funding. I'm just wondering what happens.
Well, yes, we do want to do the whole thing, but it's easier to get people to do things in baby steps. And I do believe that getting some trail down will make it more likely that people will donate to the project because they'll get a chance to see it. But yes, this is overall, we figured $1 million project, but we want to do the whole thing. And I don't think we'll be satisfied until we get a bridge across the Susquehanna for people to ride and run.
That'd be awesome. I guess my question was more that at the initial suggestion of this project, just from the Mill Race to Catella Park, the prices stayed the same, $150,000, and it seemed as though FOF was pretty confident that they would be able to secure funding. And they just sort of were looking at that time for the support of the Parks and Rec Commission. And now that's changed. And like I said, I don't think that it's unreasonable to expect the city to sort of pitch in, but I'm just wondering sort of why the shift.
I think it was just a decision to just keep, it's a huge change for FOF. You know, we have pretty much every year given out like $18,000 a year in small $1,500 grants. I mean, not much. And it was a lot for the members to all of a sudden saying, we're going all in. 50 grand was significantly more than, I mean, twice as much as our annual budget for any contribution, and it seemed like a way to not alienate members of the board.
Gotcha.
But at the same time, big enough that we could maybe get some new members.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I mean, I think it's very generous at that amount, you know, too. And like I said, I would support it. I was just curious.
Yeah, we don't plan to go back. We're going forward, but we're just kind of not slamming on the gas, just accelerating.
The other part is, I think once people see a visible piece, it's gonna be a lot easier to get additional donors for the other piece, the trestle bridge, going over the Susquehanna, all those future projects. But without something visible and in the ground and in front of us, right in our own park, I think it's hard for FOF to get those donors. So we do think it's one of those, if we build this piece, the money that they will gather will be for the other pieces.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Who's got, just two questions off the top of my head is, have you guys approached the town at all to start from Fort Park to come down so we might be able to join?
We haven't got that far, but you might have.
Yeah, we have mentioned it to the town. The town is aware on both ends of the trail of our interest in extending it. But until we get this piece done, you know, it's hard to talk about those side pieces. But the town of Oneonta is aware that we would like to bring Bridget all the way to Fort Park and beyond.
Let me also add, Scott, that you're probably aware that, I'm sure you're aware, that we were awarded a planning grant for local waterfront revitalization program. And Judy can talk about that, but the plan is the town is a partner in that. And that is going to be money that is spent on hiring engineers and experts on waterfront revitalization, on just how we could create this trail and make our waterfront more accessible. So the town is partnering us in this planning effort, which will hopefully come up with a plan to make that happen.
And yes, I forgot about that, so thanks for reminding me about that.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do, actually. I was talking to some planners today about that. Once we have a plan in place, we're gonna be, during the planning process, we'll be identifying these types of projects that we wanted to have to make connections to the waterfront. There'll be a number of things that we'll be looking at. But once we have the final plan in place, we'll be able to apply for funding to implement the things that are in our LWIP. So some of these trails and things will be able to apply for money for them as well. It's down the road. This planning process is going to take probably about 2 years. So it's going to take some time to get to the point where we can apply for these items, but it should open up a whole new avenue for funding for us.
The only other question I have is, like, just so you know, I had some people in the sixth ward come to me and said it'd be nice to have a walkie sidewalks in the park. And now I understand your answer back to me was good, it's coming, you know. My only other thing is how are we gonna take care of it and upkeep? Have we thought, I mean, it's great to put the money towards this and do this, but I wanna make sure we're also making sure that we're thinking down the road, how are we gonna upkeep this stuff? Because we know the winters around here like to heave and break and just about everything we have. So if we're gonna do this, I wanna make sure we do it right, if that makes sense.
Well, like any paved surface, it would have to be maintained, like any paved asphalt surface, it would add to the amount of maintenance that needs to be done. So, whether that's crack sealing, resurfacing eventually, now this isn't the pedestrian and bike path, it's not the road where it's gonna have a much longer lifespan.
I was
Yes, it
wondering,
does add to our maintenance. Flow.
Right, I was wondering
Of course,
if
we wouldn't be expecting at this point with our current staffing and level of service to be able to maintain this throughout the winter. That would be out of the question without additional services. Just like our current park pathways are not all maintained. But
I was just saying, wondering if any thought was given to, like, we'll have to put a certain amount of money aside, like 5 years, 10 years or whatever, so that we're ready. So when we have to redo a major portion of it, the money's there, or are we just gonna wait till last, you know, kind of like the budget and say, oh, I guess we're gonna have to put this in here because we really have to do it.
or in Parks Master Plan, I think we update that periodically, and that should include whatever projects might be coming down the line. I mean, the initial maintenance for the first 20 years of this the lifespan is the cracks in the most part. I mean, it's not going to be a major undertaking. At some point, obviously, asphalt will be moving older grades to the point where it needs to be resurfaced, and that would be a bigger expense that we'll have to go through. But I think it'll be a while before we get there. But it is, to your point, it's certainly adding another asset to the city's, inventory.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Anything you want to, any of you want to add or ask?
I think Chris and Donna have covered it pretty well. So,
Okay, well, first, let me say to all our Greenway folks, thank you for all you continue to do, and have done, and the passion for making Oneonta accessible, nature walks and being able to get outdoors and enjoy our beautiful environment. I know it's all been volunteer driven, and it's greatly appreciated, so thank you very much. And Chris, the Future of Oneonta Foundation, which I think we celebrated recently, was it the 50th or 40th?
It must be the 40th because Ben, we basically celebrated 40 years and he's the one who started it. So
Future of Oneonta Foundation has been building Oneonta's future for 40 years. And, they are very generous and they do so much, and they never knows about the properties of merit, but besides that, they give a lot of grants to local organizations. They will also partner with us in our downtown improvement fund to help us make that happen, to help us get the money to our local businesses. That could not have happened without the assistance of the Future of Oneonta Foundation or our Survive and Thrive grants to our local businesses. So, and I understand that this is a big change for Future of Oneonta Foundation. They've always said that, little pieces of money to a lot, but they feel that this is a game changer for the future of Oneonta, that they're going to change their mode and put a whole lot of resources into this one big project. So.
No, you said it well. I mean, it's easy to invest in people that have been working on something for a long time. And so that's what we want to do. We want to back the people who are passionate about making Oneonta better.
And from the Greenway, we're thrilled that they're so eager to work with us.
Okay.
It's like a dream come true. I mean, we have been working, like with $100 here and people donating $50 there, and to think about what we would need to do to asphalt this piece of trail was just really a pipe dream, and it's suddenly now something can be reality.
And one last comment, because I can't help myself, but if this does go through, of course, you will see Job Corps students working on it and assisting, whether it's, putting cement curb cuts in and things like that for the accessible parking area, or our electrical students working on watering, which we still need to do. So, I like the students being involved in visible projects that are for the city's, improvement. I think it's good for their future and just their own self-confidence, self-esteem, as it is for the community. So it's a good win-win.
Okay, if there's no further questions, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
So, next on the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy to talk about her exec proposal that they have developed for the use of the first year allocation of our parking lot.
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, would you like to start off with anything, or do you want me to go forward? In front of you on your packet, your very first page of your packet, we have a proposed ARPA spending plan. And it's very similar to what we had presented previously, with slight modifications with more recent updated numbers. And This, as you know, the city was awarded a little over $1.4 million. We received one half of it in the summer of 2021, and we'll receive the second half in the summer of 2022. And I just want to refresh that based on the revenue loss formula, we are able to use all of the ARPA funds for 2021 towards our revenue loss, which gives us a much broader flexibility in choices to use the funds for. When we were looking at the different options, the group just thought that one of the better options to choose was how many people we were going to be able to benefit the most. How many people would be able to enjoy not only residents, but visitors of Oneonta, and also to provide pandemic type recreational activities that would be outdoors, more safe. And we just thought that it was a good correlation with the ARPA funds and how many people would be able to benefit from it. And we also knew that, as was just spoken about, quite often the parks development gets postponed on the capital plan because it doesn't fall high in the priorities as far as when we have to decide how to disperse our regular funds. So we just thought it was a good opportunity to take those park projects and start moving them forward. And also for the second half of 2022, I will not know the lost revenue formula yet until the 21 books are closed. But we would very much like the council to consider funding our River Street infrastructure project and replacing the water and sewer lines within that street project. And we just thought that was a good way to share on infrastructure and recreation. The projects are listed here, and the mill race pathways, which were just spoken about by Mr. Coons, shows that the city's portion would be 100,000 and their portion would be 50. So I don't know if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask about these projects that are listed, but we were able to get the electrical infrastructure improvements phase 1 and phase 2 for the parks in the dollar amounts. And what Greg has done is he listed them basically in priority order as far as what he thought would be the most beneficial in timing wise and benefit wise to the Parks Master Program. But obviously these are open for council discussion. And these numbers right now are very rough estimates, and they're subject to change once we actually scope out and design the project and get the bids done and things like that. But this is a general plan, and what we would like to do is receive your feedback, have a discussion of other options, and or if you endorse this option, and we would like to actually include this ARPA report in our adopted budget in December. So
Jimmy, let me just also add that while there's some wider discretion because of revenue loss, some of use money for, the state has issued priorities for this money in which we'd like to see it used. I may not have them all, and you may fill me in if you remember some, Jim, but one of the top priorities is access to outdoor recreation. And that came, of course, in the pandemic, where it was recognized how important it was to people about access to free outdoor recreation for all ages. In addition, access to clean drinking water is a high priority. Other priorities that were listed are assistance to low-income persons, particularly who live in census tract areas that have been designated as I forget what the name of those census tracts are. Qualified census tracts. Those are some of the key priorities. What are some of the others?
I don't have.
But I know those were some of the key.
I saw broadband.
Yes, broadband.
Yeah,
Infrastructure as a whole, all forms of it. Clean water was noted specifically, but all forms of infrastructure are a priority, including broadband. So,
And I think assistance to senior organizations?
Yeah, assistance to people who have the greatest needs, no matter what, whether it's seniors, low income people with disabilities.
Yeah, people who are disproportionately affected by
Yeah.
the pandemic.
Correct, correct. So the selection of New York Park is a reflection of priority for providing greater opportunities for safe, clean outdoor recreation. And then year two, we looked at rebuilding our infrastructure, things that we may not be able to do with the funding part of the.
And also, just to point out, if it is approved to use it towards the infrastructure, that will reduce bonding requirements, which will benefit every taxpayer in the city, because it will save them costs over the many years of whatever the bonding period would be.
Can I just ask a question with the recent infrastructure bill being passed? Like, what is the impact of that? Or is it too early to
It's
tell?
too early. I haven't received any details on it.
Okay.
I don't know what our allocation would be. I know what my wish list is.
Yeah, right.
And, we don't know if there's going to be allocations,
Mhm.
or if it's going to be just grant programs, or a combination of both.
I think it's a vote.
And nobody knows at this point. Allocations will probably go against us because we're so small. And the big cities are gonna get so much money and we get a small amount, just like the ARPA. The big cities got giant amounts of money. But my guess, if I had a guess, it'll be the majority will be grants. And there'll be many grant programs that we can apply for. But nobody knows. The first stuff being put together and we'll find out probably in the coming months.
And also, Greg and the engineering department have many infrastructure projects well on the way of being, I would say, application ready as far as the goals and the estimates. So we're well prepared for whenever we get information on that particular infrastructure bill and its structure.
Thank you.
Jenny, can you refresh my memory? What are the restrictions of the use of the ARPA funds? What are we not allowed to use it for?
We're not allowed to use it for replenishing our rainy day fund, if is the wording putting into the fund balance. We're also not allowed to use it for anything that is not considered general government services. We're not allowed to use it for debt payments or interest payments. Let me refresh. Are you thinking of something in particular?
Personnel?
Personnel, what they highly recommend, not funding anything that is a repeated cost. So you are allowed to bring personnel back that you may have had to lay off or defer during the pandemic. And you can use those funds to bring it back, but they highly recommend that you do not do that, because once the ARPA funds are gone, you would need to find another funding source to continue those costs. You're also allowed to do bonuses, what they call premium pay, for the people that were not paid properly during the pandemic, or if for some reason there's like a bonus type area. We looked at that. All of our staff members who worked beyond their normal workday was benefited, with overtime pay. And also, we were very fortunate that we were able to keep everybody on payroll and already paid them emergency leave when they were not able to come onto site. So we did not think that that was a category that we should explore any further.
Thanks.
Glenn?
Are we allowed to generate interest income?
Yes,
Is that the plan? Because I noticed we're expending 10,000 in 21 and only 30,000 in 22, and then from there on, basically 600,000. So we should be able to generate some funds now.
yes, we can designate. I haven't done any of the interest allocations yet. And right now the interest rate, Len, is so low
Mhm.
until we see it coming up. So even if I was to invest this in the interest rates right now, it's earning like 0.02% interest. But we can always modify those budgets by whatever the interest earning is.
Right, and there's no other platform we're allowed to use.
We have to make sure that it is collateralized, and we're only allowed to invest in certain securities. They have to be US government backed, and there's basically no risk in them at all. So we can do CDs, we can do money markets and things like that. We moved a lot of our funds to New York Class. It's a investment portfolio designed for New York State municipalities. And we were earning a lot more interest in 2018 and 19. But then when COVID happened, the interest rates just plummeted. Even on our investments at the bank, it's like a 0.1% interest rate right now. I did converse with New York Class, I think it was last week, or maybe just before our meeting last week, and they told me that the interest rates are starting to return, to stay tuned, but I don't think it's going to be a fast return. I think it's going to be a gradual.
Can I ask a really silly question that is sort of in line with Dave's, but it's so obvious that you're just gonna tell me why we can't do it. So with regard to using the funds for personnel, is there, rather than adding positions or restoring positions that were cut, can we use it toward the personal services line for existing positions to balance our budget?
That's a difficult question to answer. The reason I would say that is because you can use it for general government services, which includes personnel, but also in a roundabout way that is replenishing your fund balance. So the reason I want to be extra cautious is that we have to retain all records for 5 years after we spend the ARPA funds. If they audit and find something that they do not approve, then we actually have to pay the funds back. So I would much rather be extra cautious in our planning than to
Find out we're wrong.
find out we're wrong.
Be on the hook. Sure, totally understand.
Yes.
Not only being wrong, but it's also the intent of this program is to do things for people that you could not otherwise do. It's not to help cover costs of your regular things that you fund or the regular activities that you do.
I thought that it was under, I thought that the lost revenue, I don't know, the category of lost revenue was to replace like general governmental services.
Correct. It is to replace general government services that you are able to provide to the public.
Right.
But also what the mayor is saying is they want you to look for things that would really benefit the public that you would normally not be able to do. For example, there's probably some municipalities that are going to have to use it for things that they probably just all infrastructure or things like that, depending on what their allocation is. But one of the purposes is to make sure that you're providing the public with, as the mayor said, with the top priorities that the NICOM has recommended. And that will be outdoor recreation activities, clean water, and not only with clean water as far as replacing infrastructures, but replacing lead pipes and, and things like that. So, they've given suggestions of what would best benefit the community. So we have the capability and the option of going to our parks plan for that.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent it's allowed. But the intent of the program, it's also, the intent is to be a stimulus program. So it's to spend money that you would not normally spend to stimulate the economy as well. So it's, it's both to have an impact upon people who have suffered through COVID in a positive way and to stimulate the economy. There are things that are allowable that don't accomplish those goals. But
Yeah.
those are the intended goals.
I mean, I guess I was assuming that if we were saving the taxpayers' money in that way, that we would be able to, that's sort of a reverse stimulus, right?
It cannot be used to lower taxes. That's a
Correct,
specific
yeah.
not allowed use. Now, whether it be used to prevent raising taxes, you can play with that. But it's a specific non-allowable use it cannot be used to maintain or raise your reserves. It cannot be used to it cannot be used to lower taxes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for answering my question.
I'm sorry, stop.
Just a quick question, probably more for Greg, is the park electric infrastructure improvements, phase 1 and phase 2, is that what we're talking about with the Holiday Light or the? Yeah. First, I forgot what they call it, I'm sorry.
The festival lights.
Yes,
Yes. Yeah, so, I mean, again, as Jenny mentioned, these are all high-level budgetary estimates, and, you know, the one, if you look on the left, the park projects, goal 1 through 9, that's sort of, you know, I sort of prioritize these based on my sense from what I've been hearing in the community, from the council. I mean, I know that the electric infrastructure improvements are something that everyone seems to want. Obviously, everyone is interested in the paved pathways, and there's one instance in mind for that. We've heard a lot about it, the stage. There are complaints or concerns about the trail, bridge, you know, Silver Lake being out. But again, like that $10,000 right now, that's an estimate. I think that's probably gonna cover it. We're getting estimates as we, but you know, all these numbers can actually change based on actual, which is why I think it's important to prioritize. If we do go with park projects, you know, having a list of priorities, we're gonna go in this order. And if we run out of money sooner before we get to the last one because things are more expensive than I have estimated, then you know, at least we're in the top priorities.
Talk about number 4 a little bit, the Nemo Park performance stage.
Those I identified in the Nemo Park master plan. I think that original master plan was done in like 2006, somewhere around there, 7, updated in 2013. That would be essentially where the stage is set up now, or it could be anywhere in the park, but that's where it's shown on our master plan, building the permanent stage there.
So this represents a permanent stage.
I just want to say thank you for taking the feedback that I had given with regard to some of the projects that were included. I'm really excited to see the electric infrastructure on that.
So I think what we're looking for at this time is there isn't a need to budget specific things that are binding, but we do have a need sometime in the months ahead to provide a report to the state, to the federal government, to say how we're going to spend money. What is wanted is to communicate along with the budget the general concept of the plan and the potential projects, which none of this is carved in stone at this point. None of it is going to be formally approved. But what it's looking for is consensus from the council on the concept of this plan that could then be communicated both publicly, you know, as well as I know that right now Nikon is collecting information on how all communities in New York State are, what their ARPA plan looks like, so that they can put together a volume of that and how all the communities are spending it. So what's really looked for at this time is a general consensus to the concept that is being proposed. Katie.
I support this for sure. I'd like to maybe say that, you know, Greg, to your point, if these things are an estimate, we may not be able to get to number 9 because it's one of the larger sums on there. I'd like the council to consider it, you know, potentially because it's a cultural use and we tend to lump culture and parks together. I'd like the council to consider funding some public art with this money because it's a new commission and they will need funds to get off the ground. We don't have their plan yet, so this is a little bit preliminary, but I think that, you know, if we were to have even $100,000 for public art, that would be a huge foundation for that program. Public art is a huge tourism driver, huge economic driver. So it would be good for the city in that way, and it's also been proven to benefit people's mental health. So just generally make them feel better and more engaged in the communities that they live in. So I just like to throw that out as potentially a replacement or a plan B for number 9 on this priorities list. If we aren't able to get there, I think that that would be an awesome use of those funds.
Anybody else want to agree with that? Or-
Yeah, actually, I don't know about that number. The 100,000 seems high to me,
That's fair.
but I agree that bringing art into the community, especially in the park, it's a terrific drawing card. It's great for people who live here, and it's great to be able to market the community. So I would agree.
Cool, thank you.
Does anybody object? Okay, so maybe you can play with the numbers and see how you can work that into the priorities there.
We're not financing the Arts Commission now, right? I mean, that's not what you're suggesting. We're not gonna give the Arts Commission a budget.
Yeah, I mean, is that absurd?
Don't think that that's what we passed as legislation, though, was it? That we were gonna fund or budget the Arts Commission? I thought that they were in an advisory commission, that they were gonna come up with a scope of
Well,
what to be done, but I didn't
Yes.
think that we were funding them.
I mean, it's not off the table. They are, the idea is that they would look into other funding sources, but I don't know why the city wouldn't consider funding them if we have the opportunity to do so.
What we're looking at here, if I'm understanding it, is essentially providing seed money to the organization, to the commission, that the membership and others will wind up bringing more monies into that, into perpetuity.
100%.
So essentially what we're looking at is just, salting the wine.
Right, totally. And I think the other thing to consider is that art is lasting, right? And so it's something where, once you have a sculpture or a mural, you don't do anything to it until you decide to change it. And so it's not as though they need an increasing amount of money year after year, something that's sort of as needed. And I think that, not that this is free money, but as the mayor said, things that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise fund, things like your opportunity to be able to get them started.
This would be specific to the art.
Yeah, let me also,
Specifically,
let me
right.
also add that council would have to approve any expenditures. I mean, if we set aside $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 for the arts, it's still, if the commission wanted to spend that money on something, they would still have to get the council's approval.
Right.
They could not just go out and spend the money. So all you're doing is setting aside this money to be used for the arts. And then you would be getting, as said, advisory from the Arts Commission as to what they would like to do with that money, and the council could approve or deny those individual expenditures. You're not giving them the money.
Gary.
So,
I might just be missing something, Katie. I just want to, the Meanwhile Park performance stage.
Yeah.
That's slated at almost $235,000.
Yeah.
That's investing arts into the community, because that's dance, music, the community bands, Catskill Symphony might want to use it, stuff like that. So are you talking about 100,000 on top of that? Is that?
Yeah, for like murals and sculptures and et cetera. And I'm not saying that number specifically, I'm saying if we got to number 9, which requires 175,000, and we only had 100,000 left, which is my impression of the way that this priority list will go, that I would ask this council to consider as a plan B, using that as seed money to fund the Public Arts Commission, to be able to create a sculpture trail or a series of murals or something like that. And not necessarily that full amount, but just to consider the public arts in the number 9 slot if we end up with less than
is able to fund the Neola Park Main Drive sidewalk project.
I was just confused, I'm sorry.
Sure, no, that's fair. I mean, and it is art, the performance stage, so you're totally right about that. On it, it's an art venue,
Dave,
on its own, it's
sorry.
not. No, that's okay.
Gary, is this something that we have to? If we're gonna add something like this, public art, in this list, is this something we have to do now, or we can play around with next year? And the reason I'm asking is, we've already sort of had a preliminary discussion about funding art, and I thought we had decided, let's wait until the Arts Commission comes forward with their plan, because we don't even know if or how much money they're really looking for yet. So I am all for trying to start investing in some public art, because I've been here for 20 years and we always talk about how Oneonta is a great artist area, but we have very little art. So, but I think, I just don't want us to put the cart before the horse here. And I'd like to hear what the Arts Commission.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And as we said, this is not asking the council to commit to anything, to bind anything at this time. This is about approving a concept on how we're going to spend the money, along with priorities on how this money is going to be spent. When the time comes to spend it, you can change this, and realities may change in a few months from now. The prices of these may go up or down, may cause changes. So this is really just saying, we approve this spending plan for the ARPA money with these priorities, the exact amounts to be determined.
I just want us to be careful, because if we are including a dollar amount here for public art, that is going to influence what the Arts Commission comes forward with. Because if we say 50, or let's say we say $100,000, I'm pretty sure their plan coming forward is going to say, well, we want $100,000. And it just so happens that that's what you're planning on doing.
That none of this money exists for us yet, but there is a plan and a hope that an unknown amount of money will go for.
And that being said, they're working on that plan like tomorrow, so I don't think that it's something where, you know, they'll say, oh, well, now we need another 6 months or whatever, it's like they're really looking to get it out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So if we follow this list, then does that mean that that money, whatever that amount is numbered out?
Yes, that's what
So
I
we're
was
looking at
suggesting.
24 to 26.
Not, I mean,
It depends on what we're using it for, I always.
yeah,
If I could just jump in, regarding the year to implement, that was just kind of a guide, it was for more for me, than anyone else, just, you know, what do I think we could implement over what period of time? A lot of these projects require some DPW assistance. Public art might be different, where if it wouldn't require that actually be bumped up to the schedule as far as the timing of it. But if it is a number 9 priority, then we probably like to see what those year to implement that column is definitely flexible.
Just to strike a balance too, we also have a new commission with the housing, which may, and there's been discussion about what the housing committed to do. There's a number of aspects in the comprehensive plan that we've committed. To keep our powder dry, because we don't know what's going to be coming forward from them. And to focus just right at the moment, just to say there's arts, that's a new committee. We'd like to know more about what their ideas are. There's a housing commission. We want to know more about what they're thinking about, what their financial either needs or ideas would be. And more things can be coming up.
if I can just,
Okay,
okay, yeah. Just to be clear, John, I met yesterday with the mayor and with Ginny and with Judy and with Greg. And housing was one of the potential uses of the ARPA funding that we discussed. I have been satisfactorily convinced that there are other mechanics in place to support that. And
I would let you guys speak on that a little bit if you wanted, but it's very difficult. It's also not in the same category, which is why I'm not suggesting that, not that one is more important than the other, but that I've explored that option because I think it's important. And I think that, yeah, that there are just some challenges to that.
That's,
But I agree that it's important.
that's fine. It's just a matter of more people knowing what these discussions are about, so they can be shared among
Sure.
the council.
Yeah. So we talked about yesterday, potentially funding, maybe a direct payment option to homeowners, also, maybe a grant type structure. There are challenges with that, administrative costs. I'm not the best person to be speaking on this. Do you guys, does anybody want to jump in from the audience?
No, I think what Peter's saying is true. One of the allowable things in ARPA is making direct payments to people in need, or even to businesses who have been severely impacted by COVID. There was a considerable discussion about that. That was not looked at favorably for a couple of reasons. One is the amount of money that we have is so small that once you start to divide it amongst those in need, each is going to get such a small amount of money that it's not going to have a big impact. Because we receive a fairly small amount. You know, the county received 15 million, we received 1.4 million. In addition, the administrative part of that. It's creating a grant program. You have to create eligibility requirements. You have to create, evaluation. You have to create monitoring requirements. There's a tremendous amount of administrative work that goes into that, which would cost a considerable amount of money. And when you look at the amount of money we have to give out, the amount of money that would cost for administrative costs, it just becomes almost meaningless what we can distribute. So, I was commenting with that the other day. Danny Rappin was in here, and he spoke about encouraging us to use our ARPA money to support some of our local businesses. Well, after the meeting, I asked Danny, as a member of the county board, how much of your $15 million are you using to support local businesses? And he said 0. So I said, well, why are you here asking us? And he said, well, it didn't hurt to try. But they've got 15 million. They could make a difference if that's how they chose to use it. But we have such a small amount that it really doesn't make sense to create all the administrative bureaucracy and cost to distribute.
That ultimately kind of fritters away the amount of money that we are given because of all the back end costs. So, but I appreciate the spirit of bringing those conversations to light. So I thank you for bringing that up.
So, does anybody object to us making this, presenting this as our plan? Again, it's not carved in stone, so we will be able to go forward, I'm sure. We'll be dependent upon circumstances on the ground next year, as well as the costs that actually take place. But this would be our plan for the first step of our expenditures if there's consensus on the council to do so.
Yes.
Right, I think it's a good plan. I think it's an exciting one. I think it'll bring benefits to the people of the city that they would not normally have an opportunity to see. And keeps moving forward, which is what we want to do. Quality of life is important. And free access to, recreation, outdoor space, activities that are free is very important.
Can I just ask a question about phase 2 with regard to the other funding sources? Have any of those been identified for the almost $2 million?
Oh, for River Street?
Yeah.
That would be bonded.
Okay.
Mostly, I think there might be some CHIPS funding in there for streets.
can we combine if we do get, if we are able to put this project forward for a grant or we're allocated funds from the infrastructure bill, would we be able to combine ARPA and infrastructure funding? Depending on the timeline?
Depends on the funding source and what the requirements are for the project. A lot of times when you get federal funding, you're not allowed to use additional federal funding with federal source for the local match. But it would depend on the program. We don't have to change that. We just don't know what programs they're gonna put the money out to be at.
Okay.
But it could certainly be used to reduce how much, the total cost of it. May not be able to reduce our local match, but reduce. It could be easy to require local match, but it still could be, usually we have to put in more than the required local match.
Okay.
Is what I'm trying to say. Lou?
I know this is a big question mark because it's going through CBO right now. Do we know how, if the potential passage of Build Back Better would affect the city? If at all, would there be provisions in there for?
It's just too early to start on that.
Who knows?
What are you doing this weekend?
We're just. Yeah, I had a question. I'm just looking at the Parks Master Plan, wondering why you moved the performance stage from 2026 to 2023. What you were thinking there.
I mean, those, the capital plan. I guess, like I said before, these priorities I selected based on things that I've heard, and priorities I've heard from the council. So there's some things on there that, it appears like they're coming out of order. I think there are probably some things in Maskey Field that maybe were sooner on the capital plan, but we did just invest over $1 million in Maskey Field. I guess there's kind of things that I thought would have the most impact and be most well received. But again, there are other priorities the council has.
And the council can change the order, priority order, sure.
I would just say that, with this direction that we seem to be receiving, we will move forward with, preparing plans and moving our way toward being ready to implement, especially the 2021 and 2022 things. We're gonna come back to the council when it comes time to set up the project budget for those, to get the final stamp of approval to actually spend the money and go forward with the project. But as far as engineering is concerned, mostly we've all done, working on plans and specs and that sort of thing.
And also,
That's what we pay for, very.
That and $100 things. That and $100 other things.
Yep.
Only 100?
No.
I just want us to be also sensitive to the basketball court. I mean, we talked about at the planning commission that we're going to stop utilizing one in Wilbur Park. So I noticed that the basketball court number 1 relocation is 2024, which is in the Parks Master Plan for 2024. But there's a way of moving that up because there seems that there's going to be a need. I believe the mayor brought this up before. And, if this has the greatest amount of impact with a little bit of overhead that it actually costs to have basketball court. So or just like to see maybe that moved up in the schedule.
We'll do what we can. Like I said, number 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, probably 7, and 9 all involve public works, labor, equipment, and effort to make those costs what they are. Otherwise, they'd be much higher to put these out completely to a contractor. So the work has to be spread out, and then obviously we have more work than just in the parks. So it'll be a balancing act as to what we can accomplish in this year. So that's why I'm spread it out. Understanding we have to spend all this money by the time. So
I think too, I'd just like to add if I can, that the mobile bandstand that we have is not in its best shape of its life. And so, and this is something that we've talked about at Parks, which is why I'm speaking about it with any level of authority. But, it's not something that we are just excited to have a fixed stage and trash the whole thing. It's really something that is going to need to happen if we're going to continue to host the myriad of events and things that take place on that performance stage. So it's not just an upgrade, it's really like a needed thing as well. Just for what it's worth.
By the way, that stage was donated to the
By the-
city by the future of Old Town.
Exactly. How old is the stage?
Yeah. Oh, it's gotta be.
It's,
At least
Years.
I was gonna say at least 20 years old.
Yeah.
At least 20 years.
Yeah, we used it first night, in the very early days.
I think it was early, it may have been early in Kim's term, first term.
Greg, you mentioned, skate park being part of it. What's the thinking about the skate park, what's the scope of the rehab?
See, that's again, my caveat of being high level estimates. I have no idea. We have to evaluate that and we bring in someone who's a skate park designer, someone who, if there's modifications we can make to make it better, aside from, simply just, retopping the asphalt and, Hunter Mason doing some concrete repairs. I'm not sure what else there is you can do to improve the park. But we want to explore.
I'd be happy to make some recommendations and hook you up with some people in the field as well, so that's great. I did 10-15 years ago, some of those things that were there, and there was pieces we should have done differently, and I would love to make the recommendations, which are actually fairly cheap. So there'd be some really good way to recap that and keep our costs real low. Appreciate it.
Okay, with that, we'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is water.
Mayor, I didn't know if you wanted to take a 5-minute break so you guys can help yourselves to pizza.
Everybody like a 5-minute break?
It's probably just sitting there getting cold, so I just
We'll let that go around.
To start the conversation off, we had planned on doing a Waterworks presentation tonight, but it's not quite ready. We need to tweak it a little bit more. So we'll be planning on bringing that forward to you at another date. But I do want you to know that we are also developing a plan for transitioning into quarterly billings that will be presented to you at the same time. Just so you know, the plan will have to incorporate getting caught up on the 2021 usage billings and then folding that into the 2022 conversion into quarterlies. But we'll be bringing that to you at the same time of the Waterworks presentation. So, so I'm sorry that wasn't ready for you tonight, but it just wasn't possible. But what is ready for you is an update on the water and sewer funds. And first, I would just like to let you know that I revised the water projections for 2021. The reason being is that there were a number of requests that have come in since our last presentation on the water fund that is going to require budget transfers from where we had estimated some potential savings and expenditures. So what I've done is updated the projections. I also redid projections on the revenues. And you'll see that we're still going to project a surplus of approximately 148,000 in revenues as compared to what we had budgeted. However, with the expenses, the savings was quite larger the last time that I showed this to you. But as I said, because of different repairs and different projects that have come to our attention in the water plant, we have to utilize some of those excess funds. So currently, we're actually going to have a smaller savings of about $58,000, and but so that's going to reduce our unrestricted fund balance. So I just wanted to update you on that. And most of the savings is in payroll and equipment. The majority of the equipment is from the reserves and not the unreserved. And if you bring this forward to the estimated fund balance, you will see that the restricted restricted reserve balance is about 496,000. That number is the same as the last time. But however, the unrestricted is now at 76,000. This normally would be 370,000 higher, as I mentioned to you before, but because of that advance for the Catella Well project, it's affecting the unrestricted fund in the water fund. And I just want to remind you, when the general fund makes an advance to the water fund for any particular purpose, it goes on the financial statements as a payable back to the general fund, not as a revenue source. So that is why it's affecting fund balance. And it's just get a little bit into the weeds of the financial reporting, but I just wanted you to understand that it's not a revenue source from the general fund, but it's more of a loan. It's just it's a cash advance. And according to the motion we had approved, we're hoping to repay that by December of 2024. So with that, when you take the unrestricted fund balance and we look at it compared to our budgets and we apply it to our fund balance rules, you will see how weak the water fund is. And we've talked about this a number of times, and I believe all of us are on board with the slow and gradual rate increases to be able to fix this problem. It will take us a number of years to get out of it, as our Waterworks presentation will show you, but we do have plans to get us to where we need to be as far as cash flow wise. So, go to the next one, please. So then when you start looking at the 2022 tentative budget, we're just showing you the categories of the change in expenditures between 21 and 22. And you'll see that the water fund has gone up about $186,000. And these are the areas, the service areas of where it is. And the source of supply, the reason that that one was a large decrease is because they've installed the pedestrian bridge, and that's no longer in the 2022 tentative because that project was done. And the one great thing about the revisions between the water and the sewer funds is both of the 2022 tentative budgets are using no fund balance, except for a reserve request of $45,000 to buy the water fund a truck. So there is no use of unrestricted reserve fund balances for either the water or the sewer. How that was achieved is that we ended up reclassifying some personnel costs from the sewer fund to the water fund. And then we also ended up, when reviewing our two reservoir projects, our lower reservoir and our Wilbur Lake Dam Reservoir, we had excess bond proceeds that we are able to reserve towards our 2022 debt payments. That provided about $113,000 for the water fund. I want you to keep in mind that this will be great for 2022 because it eliminated the use of fund balance. And we're hoping that with our rate structure and with the increased activity back to normal activities, that this will correct itself during 2022. But the reason I want to mention it is those funds are not going to be available for the 2023 budget. This is a one-time shot. We may have smaller amounts available depending on what the final project costs come in for Wilbur, the Wilbur Lake Reservoir. But right now, I've definitely got $113,000 that we'll be able to use. So for those two reasons, the reclassification of personnel costs and the excess bond proceeds, we were able to not have to use fund balance for either of the funds. And as I've said in previous meetings, I'm going to be requesting the council to consider approving a 10% rate increase in both the water and sewer rates and increasing the minimum payment, the minimum billing by $10. And we'll get to that in just a moment. And just so you know, those rates are implemented into the 2022 tentative estimates. And then any questions on the water fund?
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So on the next slide that you're probably going to be in that one there, on the metered sales, you're saying this is 220,000 additional revenue showing the new rates
Yes.
that we're going to get
Yes.
somewhere down the road.
Yes. Yes, this is the increase in the water revenues. I'm actually expecting the colleges to come in higher, but I want to see data before I actually put those numbers on paper to make sure that the activity is back. Because even this semester, there were a number of students that did not come back on campus. So I just want to make sure that I want to see the data first before I suggest that we get back up to the same levels pre-COVID. With the sewer fund, again, I'm just showing you the 2021 revenue projections. I am estimating that the revenues are going to come in around 63,000 higher than what we had originally anticipated, and that the expenditures were going to realize a savings of about 133,000. And again, because we were able to reclass some personnel costs from the sewer fund over to the water fund, we were able to adjust the budget without using any fund balance. The major areas of expenditures for the savings for 2021 is listed on this slide, which is basically from personnel vacancies and the retiree health insurance, vehicle maintenance, utility supplies and services. And that just gives you an idea of the type of services where we found savings. Again, personnel and health insurance, that either is because we did have some DPW vacancies during the year or also changes in health insurance coverage itself. So when we take those estimates and we apply it to our fund balance, you will see that our restricted fund balance is 460,000 anticipated for the end of the year. And our unrestricted is 954,000. This is still a strong fund balance for the sewer fund, but our goal is to make that stronger as time goes on, because when we move on to the meeting, you're going to see the projects that we are going to need financing for. And when you apply those projections to our fund balance target, you will see that our unrestricted fund balance, we have a nice balance for the 35%, even the 40% classifications of our unrestricted. And applying the 10% rate increase to the 2022 tentative, you will see that comparing the sewer funds revenues from the 21 to the 22 tentative, we're increasing estimated revenues of about $157,000. And then if you examine the expenditure categories, you will see that we're actually decreasing the expenditures within the sewer fund by just over 52,000. The majority of this is because of the personnel costs that we shifted to the water fund, but also we finished cleaning the, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the digester, correct, that we had to clean. That was a big expenditure for 2021, and that is no longer in the budget. So what I would like you to do in your handouts, your next set of pages shows you our current water rates and our current sewer rates for 2021. They have the red ink on them. And you will see the proposed rates for 2022 for the water and sewer funds themselves. What these tables do, it increases the minimum step by $10. And then it also increases the actual rate tables by 10%. At the bottom of the charts, you will see that we showed the increase for the annual change. And I'm just going to use the water as an example. If someone uses up to 37,000 gallons, their bill is going to go up for $10 for water. If they use up to 75,000 gallons, it will go up $26.72, and so on down the chart. I was just showing you what the annual increase was if they got to the absolute max of that particular step. And the slide will show you where we added the water and sewer charge together. So if it's 37,000 gallons, their bill is only going to go up $20 for the year. Yes.
I think we discussed this before, but just refresh my memory, Jenny. Approximately what percentage of the city is at about that 37,000 below?
No, around an average of our 3,800 annual billings that we send out, about 1,800 of them are at the minimum.
Okay.
And then there's about close to another 1,000 that are on the second step.
Okay.
So the majority of the annual users are within the first 3 steps of the chart. So we just wanted to provide you with the information. To show you what their annual bill would go up. And of course, if you divide this by 12 months, per year, it's a very small dollar amount per month for the majority of the people.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you a quick question? from my understanding? So, if you were to use 37,000 gallons and be charged the minimum of $2.18, it ends up being like half a penny, right, per gallon?
Well, I want to, yeah, basically, but what I want you to understand is that the minimum fee is not only for the first 37,000 gallons, but it's also for the infrastructure that gets the water there. So not only is the base, it's almost like the 37,000 gallons is a bonus, because the base rate for providing the infrastructure to get the treated water to your house is what's really that base minimum is for.
Okay,
And then we start getting into the usage charges.
gotcha. And so the next step
it's, the rate, the sort of half a penny goes down to 4/10 of a penny.
Yeah, the compounding effect, and last spring, I believe I sent everybody a very detailed math schedule of how the water rates were calculated. And as you go through the steps, it compounds. So even though it looks like it's only, it's been said before that it's fractions of a cent between the steps, as you compound through it, if you were to pay 3 million, if you were to pay for 3 million gallons of water at the first step versus the 3 million gallons of water at the top step, it's almost a 42% difference
42%
as you go up through the
decrease?
no, increase.
Okay.
So even though it looks like it's very small pennies or fractions of pennies going through the steps, it compounds as you go through.
And these fees are charged on top of where it says fee per step, that's charged on top of the rate.
No, it's a cumulative. So what happens, it's an ascending rate. So what we're trying to do is encourage water conservation.
Right.
So for the first 37,000 gallons, you're going to pay, let me just get mine. You're going to pay, if you approve the proposed, you'll pay $228 for the first 37,000 gallons, plus support the infrastructure that you did there. For the next 38,000 gallons of water, you're going to pay $184.30. So your total bill will be $412.30.
Up to 75,000.
Up to 75,000 gallons. If you use 195,000 gallons, your next 120,000 gallons is going to be charged at $4.93 per thousand. And that total bill would be $1,003.90. You see how it works?
I'm understanding. Yep, thank you.
Yes.
Jenny, this is more of a strategizing question, but how easy is it to access the names of the folks who are, let's say, 5,000 gallons or less into the next level of charges? I wonder if we were able to determine who those people were, we could probably encourage them to be conserving for the fact that their water usage at that minimal level is going to take them up to that next level.
We publish the rates for the public to see.
Yeah.
And quite often, and this is, we actually have pictures of pinhole sizes to show people if they have like a running toilet.
Right.
Or a leak, a dripping faucet. A pinhole, and I'm talking about the size of a safety pin. If water is allowed to go through that, thousands of gallons of water will be used in a very short period of time. And they don't understand that when they have a leak, and that's why sometimes the 5,000 gallons, it could be because the plumbing isn't quite right, and not necessarily the usage, but it just could be that they need to fix a leak. We will send the DPW workers to the house if they need assistance to try to locate the leak.
Sure.
But we also have different things that will tell homeowners, read your meter,
Right.
Leave it, have all your water turned off. Even if you have water in your refrigerator, you need to make sure that's turned off. Then wait 20 minutes, go down and read your meter again, see if the numbers have changed. If they've changed and you're not running water, you've got water leaking somewhere in the house.
Right.
We also just suggest putting colored tablets in the back of their toilet. Then if the water turns color in their toilet without flushing, you know that the water is running through the back of the toilet.
Right. My question is more about the database.
The database, yes, we have for the annual billings, I know every account and the
Yeah.
amount that they
It would
use.
seem like a public service to let people know that, hey, you're within 5,000 gallons of going to a much more expensive level of payment.
And also it's, the only thing is it's a little skewed, as I told you, for the 2020 billing, because people were at home more than normal because of COVID itself, their usage went up. And we had a number of people call saying, why is my bill so high this year? And it's just, they didn't realize that they were using their water at home versus using it at school or at work. And also with the meters, the new meters that we installed a number of years ago, the accuracy is much better. And DPW tests certain size meters to make sure. But no, we can always, matter of fact, we can even insert the rate tables in the billing if you would like to make it that public.
Jen, if I could add, we're also switching to upgrading to a new meter reading system. And software that will allow us to create an online portal where customers will sign up and they can log in, have a username and password, and log into their account and see what their usage is on a monthly basis.
That's huge, that's huge.
So they'll be able to monitor their own usage without having to call Mary Ann and ask or realize actually their bill.
Yeah.
So that'd be a big step. We've been looking to do that for a while, and now I think we're able to.
And it's a matter of education of the fact that they can do this.
And also that, that system that Greg is mentioning, we've got possible options of getting the bills online right there also. We haven't explored that yet, but we're hoping that eventually we won't have to mail out the bills except for people who want them. And that would make it more efficient, less cost to the city.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions on the water and sewer?
Great, thank you, Jimmy.
You're welcome.
We're gonna do debt service next.
Yeah, we're gonna do debt service next. We do not have a slide for it, but it is the next handout. The reason we don't have a slide for it is well, there was just too much information to get up on the screen. So the proposed projects with the possible debt financing, what Greg and I did is we went through the different projects that we have been discussing and planning for and showing you the different potential bonding requirements that we're going to have for the general water and sewer and transit funds. And the other funding sources are, the majority of them are grant dollars, or they could just be contributions from the operating funds themselves. So what you will see, we've got $50 million worth of projects here. And 28, we're expecting about a little over 28 million of it to be funded through outside sources or the operating funds themselves. But the potential borrowing for the general fund is 9.3. The water fund is 4.8, the sewer fund is 3.4, and the transit fund is 4.2. Now, from our bond council, they provided me with 3.5 to 4.5, just to give you an idea, at a 20-year 3% rate, which I think right now in the market is a little high, but it would depend on obviously how interest rates adjust. And you will see that the annual debt service payment ranges from $235,000 to $302,000. But in connection with this data, I would also like you to go to the next page that shows you our future debt payments. These are already the debt payments that we incurred. And you will see that in 2023, our general fund annual debt service goes from $656,000 down to $460,000. That the reason for that is one of our issues is now going to be fully paid. So our debt service is going to go down by a little over $195,000. What that does is it prepares us to take on new debt by 2023. And normally when we do projects, because we have a strong cash balance on hand with our strong fund balances, we don't have to issue BANs to get us through cash wise. That saves the taxpayer a lot of money. And once we do is we will do the bond authorization, and usually our bond payment is not due until the next year after our bond is issued. So if we issue debt in 2022, we will not be making our first bond payment until 2023, and so on down the line. If we don't issue it until 2023, we will not be making our first bond payment until the 2024. So I just wanted to let you know, cash flow wise and budget wise, the timing of when we do issue debt. So obviously, we do not think that we'll be able to afford to bond 9.3 million in the general fund unless we find other sources. Now, one good thing about this schedule that I'm showing you is almost all of it is infrastructure. So depending on what we get, if anything, through the infrastructure bill, many of these numbers may change over to other funding sources because we'll get grants for them. Also, with the big Build Back Better, I do not know what would be there in that project grants either. So future, these numbers are subject to change depending on what the city grants will be received through the federal programs that they're currently working on. But can we afford, say we got no other grant money, can we afford a $9.3 million debt by, well, even by 2025, I would say no. So we will have to choose which projects that we need to prioritize and decide which ones we are going to bond for. Do I think the water and sewer will be able to afford theirs? Yes, I do, because we can work those right into our rates. And just so you know, that's one thing Greg and I were working on today for our waterworks presentation. Every project that's listed here in the water and sewer is on our waterworks presentation, and we have funded it through the rate structure. So I'm very confident that the water and sewer funds will be able to handle this debt. The general fund, we are going to have to make decisions. But as I said, if the infrastructure bills come through, a lot of this could be funded in other ways. Is there any questions?
Has the Domansky Field renovation been scheduled for 2025 sometime like that?
We don't have the money allocated for it. We have to identify where we need to come from.
Yeah, 'cause I thought that project was scheduled.
Well, we have $1 million, which was phase one. We need another $1 million for phase two. We were going to do some fundraising, some local fundraising, to see what we could do, and then COVID hit. That all got put on hold, and at this time, in order to complete it, we have to identify where $1 million is going to come from.
So between now and 2025, what's the plan?
The plan is to make a plan. I mean, you know, I think from people I've spoken to, there's considerable interest in private donation towards that, but it has to be organized.
So are you saying this is essentially just a placeholder right now?
Yeah, if the project has been identified, we have a process for it. You know,
Okay.
certainly you could bond for it. That's what's shown at that
And-
project schedule has some other money.
Maybe there will be a grant through the infrastructure program that becomes, that this would be eligible for. That would be a wonderful thing. Verizon. Are we moving on to general fund?
Yeah, if there's not any further questions.
So we're scheduled to make 1.545 in debt services payments this year, right? So 1,545,920. I'm looking at page 16, which that's what we're scheduled out to do, correct?
Between the three funds?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then you already identified that it's going to drop down by 400,000, so it's going to be just under 1.3 million is what our debt service payment is going to be pretty much the next several years unless we increase that debt service.
Unless we increase the debt service, correct, yes, and as I said, in 2023, the general fund debt service will go down by a little over 195,000 between the 656 and the 460.
Right, but I'm just looking at the three top projects in your sheet here for potentials, which come up with a Lettuce Highway, the Glenwood Creek, and then the Transit Hub parking garage. And so if council was to pass those three projects, so we're roughly talking 4, 6, 6.5 mil, 30 years, give or take. That's that.
Well, I don't have a 30-year calculation, but I can get that to update it, but
You do this all the time. It was a ballpark.
yeah.
That's gonna add up.
um,
1,000.
Yeah, I, hold on a second. My brain's tired, Len, so give me 1 second.
Okay. My guess would be 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I would want to say it would be right around 400,000. For if we were to extend, if we were to borrow 6 million to 30 years. But I will confirm that with bond counsel to give the council an accurate
Because
number.
that's on top of the existing.
That would be on
debt.
top of the
So, I
existing.
mean,
debt,
we would
right.
be increasing our debt balance by $600,000 a year.
Well,
That's what I was trying to
No,
identify is that we may be going down by a couple 100,000, but if we
Yeah.
take these 3 projects on, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're
Right.
gonna go above what we're already paying right now.
Right,
for-
so you'd be basically increasing the current debt level by, I would say, at least between 2 to 250,000.
Absolutely.
So, actually, this is a perfect segment to talk about the general fund budget, because this is exactly why I've been expressing concern about having a budget that has to go into our general fund by, unrestricted general fund by so much money. And I'm less concerned about taking money out of the general fund this year than I am about setting the baseline for next year and the year after. It's going to be so high that we're going to have to continue to take money out of the, more than we can afford. And on top of that, if we want to do these projects, find another $400,000 or $500,000 a year to pay them off, to pay the debt. So my main concern is setting a baseline here, so we can't take our way out of it, and then we can't afford to take on new debt. So what I am pleased to say is that, I thank Jimmy and Greg for putting up with me the last few days. But I think we agreed upon a plan for this year's budget that the 3 of us can support. I'm hoping the council can support it as well, we shall see. And that is Jimmy identified potential areas where we could reduce our spending. There's no doubt that those cuts are painful. None of those cuts are without pain. But if they wouldn't cause pain, they wouldn't be in there in the first place. And obviously, they're in there because we want that. But we're in the same position we were a year ago. A year ago, our revenue was very unknown. We didn't know where things were. So because of that, we budgeted very, very conservative. And said, if things look brighter as the year goes on, we will then revisit that and put those things that we want back in. So right now, we're in the same boat. We're in a still very, very unsure of all revenue sources. There's a good reason to believe, and I think that there's reason for some optimism, that sales tax is going to be much higher than Jimmy is budgeting. And I give Jimmy credit for being very conservative. I think there's a chance that we may get more state agency here than we have, because we have a new governor who's more in tune with small local governments. And the state is flush right now in money because they got so much money out of local. So those 2 areas could really produce an influx in revenue. Now, we would know in the next few months whether that's going to happen. So what we've agreed is a sensible, conservative, and responsible approach is to do what we did last year, which is take some cuts that are painful, budget conservatively, adopt the cuts to the tentative budget that Jimmy's outlined that can be made, with the understanding that in the spring, we take another look. And if we see sales taxes coming in consistently high, if we see state aid is increased, we can then start bringing those things back into the budget comfortably. It's yours, Jimmy.
Okay, so
Okay, I'll start, I guess. So, you know, as the mayor said, last week we presented the tentative budget. That was something that Jimmy and I were comfortable with, that understanding that it was, a big ask as far as taking money from fund balance. We had been through multiple rounds of discussions with department heads and we had many cuts as we thought we could at that time. You know, based on our discussion with the council last week, the council seems to want to reduce that deficit further and to be more comfortable. So as the mayor said, none of these, well, maybe some of these, a few of these smaller ones we found that aren't that big of a deal, but some of these I think are a big deal. Namely, in my opinion, the first two are difficult because those are a matter of circumstance and that we just happen to have vacancies at the moment in the positions that were otherwise funded in 2021. But given that the task we were given, which was looking at all options, they are options to leave vacant a little bit longer, potentially reconsidering next year. As the mayor mentioned. You know, I think we have a potential alternative with respect to number one, the reorganization of deputy human development director. That's obviously a new position, that's never been filled before in that role. It was budgeted for this year, beginning in July. We've been in the process of seeking applicants. You know, if we were to decide to push that off, another alternative that I've discussed with you would be to combine some of the duties of that position with an existing position in the city and the code enforcement office, our code enforcement officer specifically. And supplement both of those offices with some additional part-time help that would help maintain the same level of service that the code enforcement office provides now, while also providing duties and support. As you all know, has been a department of one for her entire tenure here. So that's one consideration. That's what is reflected on that line. Number two, the police lieutenant. As you know, Chief Wittenberg has been acting essentially two roles for quite some time now, since last February, and he's been able to make ends meet per se, and we've had shortages throughout the department. We get some reinforcements now with the new recruits having graduated, but this isn't something that I think it should be taken lightly. It is unfortunate that, like I said, this is just happens to be vacant right now, and that's why it's even being considered as an option. We didn't want to, certainly the council said we didn't want to consider layoffs. We're only considering the vacant positions. So it just so happens to be this one. But I think, I would be happy to let the chief speak if you'd like to hear from him as to the impact that this would have to go longer on the way things are. Certainly, we've been able to scrape by, and it's something to consider. But I just want everyone to understand that there are consequences, and it will have an impact on the department to try to go longer the way we have. We can come back to that if you'd like to go through all of them to start. So, number three, safety officer. That was something where we were looking at potentially awarding a stipend to an existing employee. We haven't identified a specific individual for that. That would be something where they would kind of take the lead on organizing our safety policies, reviewing them with department heads, and just overall compliance review with respect to us meeting PESH standards. It's not a required position. It's not something we've had. It's something that Katie and I think, talked about the first meeting I ever had with her about being, something that potentially benefit the city. But right now, it's just something we handle collectively as department heads and the city administration together, and we can continue to do that for the time being if we so choose. The minor part-time overtime adjustments, I don't know specifically what those were. There's a few things that probably make it worth discussing any further. The health insurance estimates for 3 firefighters, maybe Jim, you can explain exactly what that is.
Sure. As you know, right now, 3 additional firefighters are being funded in the 2022 tentative budget. Normally, any vacancies, I would budget at a family plan to make sure that there's funds available, because I have no idea what the new employee will need coverage for. But because these are unknowns, and I look back on the history of the new hires currently on the firefighters, what I did is I modified the health insurance for the 3 vacancies, and instead of budgeting 3 family plans, I budgeted 2 single plans and 1 family plan. And it's just, that number is subject to change depending on what coverage comes in as far as who gets hired. But that is what that 27,000 represents.
Road salt supply, I mentioned this in the last meeting that, you know, we had budgeted $120,000 in 2022. Historically, we spent somewhere between the lowest, I think, 90,000 up to 130 or so over the past number of years since I've been here. So obviously, that's dependent on whether, I think obviously we're going to have to make a budget transfer if we have enough storage where we need to, but that's something that we can, you know, less conservatively and see a reduction in the budget. I'm gonna skip number 7, come back to that. Number 8, police staff training, I believe, and I let Chief Witzenberg speak to this if I misstate something, but I believe there was a reduction in the amount we were going to intend to spend on police academy recruit training based on the number we've descending.
That's correct.
Number 9, fire staff training, similar. Brian, jump in if I'm misstating, but I believe we'd be reducing that to intend to send 3 recruits to the academy. Anticipation, which like we discussed before, the anticipation of filling retirement. Non-public safety training is everything else. We asked people to look at what training could be cut that would be non-essential as far as it's not required for them to be able to perform their jobs. I think this is, again, it's not something we recommended initially because we've been cutting training for a few years now, a couple of years, I guess, since COVID. So it's been a while since a lot of our departments have had a chance to send their employees to training that really enhances their value. So we'd rather not, but if it's not essential, we can consider it. Police ammunition, Chief Witzenberg said that he believes he could cut that down a little bit this year. Same with the police cold storage, that's for storing evidence that requires refrigeration. We have, system now, this would be an improvement on that. Something we can get by for reconsideration in July. Various supplies in the fire department, Chief Knapp identified a number of things that could be reconsidered later in the year. Towing fees, that's something we caught that really, if we tow cars to parking during snowstorms or wherever it might be, those are going to be replenished with revenues that offset the expense. So we felt we could reduce that line. The radar speed feedback sign for the east end, that was something we were looking at do, similar to what we have on East Street, West Street, Chestnut Street. We're going to do one on the east end of Main Street. That's something we can push off and consider later. Office furniture, City Hall, there were some departments that were looking at potentially upgrading some things, we could try to push that off. And then number 17, funding for Saturday Main Street closures. Our thought was, we don't know that the future of that program, and we think that's something maybe could be discussed at a later date. When it comes closer, and there's more of a solid plan for the 2022 can include. Maybe that's something that the cool grant that we've been talking about creating could fund. Consider that. And then number 18, we'll see down there on its own, it's a fire truck that initially was an initial work last submitted by Chief Knapp as part of the budget. That was removed, just, you see it's got a big price tag and we're trying to bring the budget down. We don't have a funding source identified for that aside from the city either leasing or bonding for a fire truck, which would incur a significant, I forget what the number would be. Cost per year. We think there's opportunities to seek outside funding. We have received grant funding in the past for large fire apparatus. It's something we think we should, pursue before we go it alone. However, Chief Knapp and our fleet manager, Charlie Upner, have, told me just recently that, it's really something we need to be moving on as soon as we can identify a viable option, because it's, I forget how many years it is.
21.
It's 20?
21.
So, typically these are on a 20-year replacement schedule. It's at the end of its expected useful life. It's obviously an important piece of equipment. So we wanted to put that back on there as a potential July reconsideration. Give us a little time to try to find another funding source if we can and reassess at that time. We didn't want to. I wanted to add that on there just because of, I think the need there. Jumping back up to 7, which actually takes us to the next page, there's a breakdown. of some of the survey equipment and engineering. Currently, we hire professional surveyors for everything that we do that requires survey. We've got, with our engineer and GIS technicians on board now, we've rented some surveying equipment that's gone pretty well. We're doing some stuff in house. We think we could purchase that. And I think that would pay for itself in 5 years easily. If we chose not to purchase this or delay it, we would need to spend some money out of our budget in 2022 to hire surveyors. Shared computers, wireless access point, public safety, I believe that's improved the Wi-Fi there, which isn't stellar, however, I don't believe that it's a top priority. Perhaps something that police undercover vehicle, that's something that's replaced periodically. Chief Rosenberg indicated that was something that could probably wait a little longer as well. Same with the next two, fire hose replacement, the radio system upgrade. So that's something that, you know, I wouldn't want to wait too long on that. That's something we identified both in police and fire. I think it's worth looking citywide at our communications. We have a study, and we think maybe $25,000 might be needed for that. Alternatively, I've been talking with the county about, you know, if there's some sort of shared services or a way that we can get some help from them and that. So we're definitely going to pursue that. Whether or not this is included in the budget or delayed, we're going to move forward with trying to coordinate with them and have this plan ready to go. Because it is something where our communications are kind of outdated in some respects. Maintenance of roads, skid steer for the winter tracks for the skid steer. We use skid steer this year to clear the Deep Street parking lot and some other areas. And it's going to be difficult without correct tracks for that. Grading bucket for the excavator, that's what the letters and numbers mean. That's just to set it up for most efficient operation. That's probably the lower priority to pursue there. And then the parks field break and then zero turn riding mowers. We have these things are obviously on a regular replacement schedule. Zero turn, you know, it's something that I'm sure we could scrape by and get through if we had pushed those off. If we push them to July, you know, we're obviously not going to have them for this mowing season. Their considerations. So, I mean, we kind of presented this as a menu of options for something you could take the full course, full 17 course. Prefer, if there are questions.
Questions? Comments?
I noticed the bucket truck is going to be removed.
That page there is just a list of equipment to be funded from restricted reserve funds currently included in the 2020 budget. Those are not intended to be removed. We included those just so you're aware of what the equipment is out there. But we're not recommending their removal because that wouldn't affect the unrestricted fund balance for what we're trying to reduce. So those are all still in as a.
What's the current age of our bucket truck? I didn't see it on the fleet schedule to be replaced in 22. Going back to the 21 budget, I didn't find it there either. Did ours break?
It's not broken. It's been recommended by our fleet manager that it's rusting out as road signs covering holes. And, you know, it's just recommended for replacement this time. I can look up to see how old it is. And it's a piece of equipment that gets used just whatever they're multiple things. And we did reduce. In all of those areas, police, fire, maintenance of roads, requests that were not funded, that were previously cut. These were the ones that remain are the highest priorities.
Number 18, is it a fire truck or is that the heavy rescue that we're referring to?
Heavy rescue that I believe intended to fit the combination. Brian.
Want to jump in?
Feel free if you want to understand more about the fire truck.
So if you remember, I believe it was last year, two chiefs, they presented a Quinn concept and turning it into
having a ladder and a rescue at the same time, but they also wanted to follow that up with the very next year having a smaller engine for, I want to say like $400,000. My theory is, if I can combine the two of them, I'm gonna replace the rescue that we've talked about here tonight and get the ladder truck that's, in my opinion, desperately needed. I just want to add a little bit more to what Greg talked about and why I think it's important to at least look at this, because our fleet is getting really, really old. This vehicle already should have been replaced. I have another vehicle that's a fire engine that's due to be replaced next year. And it's a year build time to get these things. So if we push this off for another budget cycle, we're gonna be in 2024. And then I have another engine in 2028. So within 4 years, there would be 3 major purchases. So I feel like if we continue to push this off down the road, we're potentially putting ourselves up for having some financial struggles. Because I don't think, honestly, sitting here tonight, we would be able to even think about making 3 major purchases like that within 3 years.
Chief, if I could just say something, I think one of the things that we have failed to do is to jump on this sooner. There hasn't been any effort to go on. I don't think typically, and you can certainly call around to other chiefs and see what you hear. I don't think typically small communities like ours pay for these big $1.5 million trucks completely out of pocket. They go to the state, they go through the legislators, they get number items, go through our local foundations. That's what we did when it came time to replace, to buy the big ladder truck that was bought for $1.2 million a couple of years ago.
I remember.
But we spent a year or two going after that money, planning to do that. We were successful in getting both of our state legislators to come up with $250,000. I think we had some additional support from local foundations. We haven't done that. So what we need to do now, before we try to dig into our pockets for this kind of money, is, and I said to Greg that I will certainly take that on in the next month or so, in contacting all of the folks that have some ability to bring money home at the state level. And I will also make some calls to our local foundations to see. We won't get the full amount, but if we can come up with half, that's a big deal.
Gary, previously, I agree with you, we got quite a bit of money from McGee and Stewart. But what we had started doing under Mayor Miller was putting a big chunk of money every year, or it was either 2 or 3 years, into a fund to go toward that engine, and then we were surprised by the money that came from Albany, which allowed us to purchase the truck.
Very much.
Thanks for looking at that. So these things require planning, and honestly, this week is the first time I heard that there was a sudden now need for $1.4 million fund.
Which is a $500,000 increase from the fleet, for the fleet schedule. It's listed in 2022 for $1 million.
Yeah, I think those numbers are a little bit under where we realistically need to be.
Okay.
But we'll work on it. We'll work on it.
I mean, I think this has been, for several years, this has been a request, I believe. So I'm just carrying it on and tweaking it a little bit. I did have this in my original request, and obviously with
Well,
everything
I
going
will
on.
Get the ball rolling on seeing what money we can come up with. And then I'll have the time on for Mark to finish the job. And hopefully get that. Mark.
So Greg, I did want to go back to the bucket truck. So are you, on page 7, this handout tonight. Are you, am I misunderstanding you? You're saying that this 165,000 will not have an effect on the tentative budget? I'm not for sure I understand what you're doing.
The items included on page 7, those are equipment to be funded from existing restricted reserve funds. So to say we would remove the bucket truck from 165, that would not affect our current deficit with respect to the use of unrestricted fund balance. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that right? Dee?
Yes.
Did I
In the
understand?
10
Well, that's a 10-year life cycle, and it's 10 years old.
So it's a 2007.
This is 2011.
Okay. It's just that I can't find, in the 21 budget, I'm looking all over the place for this bucket truck, and I could be missing it, but I don't see it, it's just.
Oh, that's the previous year.
This is the 21 budget, and I'm trying to find in the fleet management.
Right, and that changes annually, so within 2022.
Right, so I'm looking at 22. And I'm not seeing it, so I went to 23, and I'm not seeing it listed, so I was just wondering why all of a sudden it became a need.
So, based on the feedback from our works crews and the fleet manager.
I also noticed that we had an increase in our street lighting by more than 48,000. I thought that was gonna go down. We were gonna see a decrease in our LEDs. So I was wondering why the budget for street lighting was going up by 3,000.
Yeah, what you're not seeing there in that budget line is the savings in electricity costs. So we no longer pay NYSEG a fee per fixture to maintain. That's gone away, and also obviously the energy cost has gone down by being LED as opposed to high pressure sodium. What you're seeing there is an increase in the maintenance line, which previously would have been very little because we only had the decorative street lights like the downtown ones. Now we have to maintain the whole city system, so that's why that's increased to have a contractor available to make those repairs. It still results in a net, a large net savings to the city. It's just we now have to coordinate and pay directly for the maintenance, as opposed to paying that per fixture fee.
I did notice on the snow and ice removal, it was an increase of 47.8, so you decreased that by 30 tonight in this new handout, so we're still gonna look at an increase of 17.8. I was confused on the off-street parking. Could you guys explain to me why we have that as a line item, off-street parking?
Parking garage and all the parking lots that we only maintain require maintenance. Those unrelated to those also included in that budget line is the arcade, which will no longer be ours eventually, but we will be contributing some of the costs, maintenance, HVAC and that sort of thing.
So in that line item is where the arcade is, because I was trying to find that also.
Yeah.
I really didn't understand that we were spending $15,000 a year to clean that arcade. That was kind of a shocker to me when we were talking about it with the CFO from Springbrook.
Yeah, when you add up our staff time, that every day.
Very.
Oh, that's okay. So I just want to inquire about the police lieutenant. Obviously, that's something that, I mean, I have a question about the impact. Let me say this. I have a question about the impact of not pursuing a deputy community development director. Do we not have candidates for that? Is that why we feel comfortable?
No, we have candidates. We haven't interviewed anyone yet for that. It's been advertising. There's been a number of candidates that applied. I can't speak about the specific candidates, and their qualifications or anything like that.
Right.
The reason that those two positions, and I think it's important to know, the reason they're being considered for being left vacant for whatever period of time, because they're currently vacant and they've been vacant.
Right.
And they're not, and I will let Judy jump in and Chief Wickenberg as well to talk about the impact that will have. Obviously, the students, as much as we identified it as a need, it has been vacant, it's never been filled, so it's less of an impact than freaking Langston and all. And Jenny and I were looking for every opportunity to reduce that budget, because obviously we couldn't make up the whole gap even with these. So I guess with that, I'll stop talking.
No, that's okay. I guess, yeah, I guess the other thing is like the police lieutenant, like, it sounds like you have a plan And I'm interested in the impact of that to sort of mitigate not filling the deputy community development director position. But the police lieutenant, obviously is something that will be filled eventually. And so what is the plan for funding that position going forward? Because it's not a position that we're going to eliminate. We're just keeping it out of this budget in order to keep it balanced.
They're funded as soon as we can afford it. So if we see sales taxes coming in at a higher rate than we budgeted, if we see state aid is higher than we budgeted, in the first 2 months of the year, first quarter is above the second quarter of the year. If that's the number one priority, I think we're going to.
And if it's not, I mean, do we just not have a police lieutenant for a year? That seems like it's not actually an option, if that makes sense.
Then decisions have to be made as to what is less of a priority than police lieutenant. So in other words, you can only spend what you have.
Right, yeah.
So if police lieutenant is top priority and we're not taking in more revenue, then something that's a lower priority.
Okay. Okay, I would love to hear from Judy and Chief Wittenberg, if that's okay, on I think that would help us understand the impacts of making these cuts.
Judy, it's all yours.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna have a huge impact. I'm busy and there's a lot of other things I wanna do. And having another full-time person that has a level of skill that can jump right in and take off. Yeah, it would be great. If it doesn't get included in the budget, then the option that Greg and Katie have come up with will work. Not as good, but I don't think it's as good as having a full-time dedicated employee
Sure.
working there.
And I'm sorry, could you just go into a little bit more about what that solution entails? And you said it's someone from code, but how does that integrate?
Well, I think there's a natural connection between community development and code enforcement that I think, if we did have to go this direction, I think it would actually develop into something that would be so beneficial to the city. And even if we did fill a full-time position, I think it would go in some kind of direction to continue to grow that relationship. There's just a lot of commonalities there. We're looking at housing, we're looking at housing grants. Stephen, our code enforcement officer, is rewriting code to, downtown anyone code that is directed to developing the city of Leon in a way that encourages positive growth, and that's what Judy's all about. So those two things go very well together. So by formalizing that relationship a bit more, and also, we'd have to hire some additional part-time staff to help, make sure the code enforcement office is not, dropping the level of service. And I think some of, Judy can talk a little bit more, as much as we need a deputy community development director, that's what's, budgeted for, I think, is having people available to help, you get the summers. Yeah, the whole creative the Summers Parks sort of a situation where you have multiple people working together on projects and opposed to trying to go along, even though it wouldn't be, as she said, the equivalent of one dedicated full-time person.
And if we had to hire additional part-time staff, I mean, what would the offset for that
That's
be?
what that number is included.
It is,
It was
okay,
removing the cost of the additional full-time deputy community development director plus the additional part-time
Okay.
staff and stuff.
Okay.
But you.
Yeah, I mean, I do everything. I have no help. I don't even have administrative help. So if a letter has to go out to the mailbox, I have to walk it out there. So like, there are times with the grants, especially with the DRI, when it was, full blown, I was just pushing paper all day long. I had nobody dedicated to be able to help with that. And if I had, now that the DRI stuff is starting to get to the later end or halfway through some of the grants and some are almost done, there's other initiatives I want to work on. And I need help to do that because I have to do the work, I have to attend all the meetings, and I have to think about, the big picture. And sometimes you need to just sit there and think, but I have all these deadlines and stuff. So having a second full-time person dedicated to that has a skill level that I need, can walk right in, help with the grants, help with the paperwork, help with the planning, big picture stuff, start to tackle some of the economic development stuff that we want to work on, the housing issues, all kinds of initiatives that, you know, the LWRP, the housing initiatives are going to be huge, I think. Lots of grant work with that. But having staff dedicated to that will, you know, it's desperately needed. I've been 5 years as of Halloween with no help. And it's been a lot, but there's so many things I want to do, and just having more help, you know, this option with the codes is great. That'll help. But having full-time staff is really, really the optimal. Okay.
I really don't even know where to begin. This has been a horrendous year for me. Between bail reform, police reform, discovery reform, management of personnel, trying to keep morale high, this has been a massive challenge. And for me to look at the sheet of paper to see $131,100 savings, when we're talking about a promotion for a sergeant moving into a lieutenant's position, that would potentially be a net loss of earning potential for the sergeant. Seems to be a little bit mathematically questionable. I only have right now 24 staff. I'm down one position, have two prospective retirements next year. And we've been short for many years. And I could sooner see not filling a potential position than effectively kicking the can down the road on what's my assistant chief. This isn't a lieutenant's position. This is my deputy chief's position. And I think looking at the fire department with having an assistant chief, we wouldn't say that, like we just say, okay, chief, you have to run the department by yourself and rely on your captains. This is a position that would potentially open a second promotion for a sergeant. I know I'd asked for an additional sergeant's position in addition for administrative work. We might be able to kick the can down the road on something like that, but for the assistant chief's position, I think this is a really difficult thing for me to just find out about in the last couple of days. So how it is that we come to $131,000 in savings when we're talking about promoting an existing personnel position, I don't see that as being the savings that you're going to get realistically, and it's going to put me in a handicapped position when it comes to being able to move forward on any initiatives that we've discussed over the last year. So this is a really terrible thing for me to see on the paper.
Scott? All right, so here we go. I got a few. Fire Chief Knapp, I just have a quick question. It's just to put out there. I understand you need possibly a new fire truck. You're looking at 3. We know with staffing and the callback issues and stuff like that. Getting this vehicle, is there potential to downsize some of the vehicles in the department?
That's actually the plan, combining this and the way I see it moving forward. We would have our row of ambulances and we would be with 2 engines and 2 aerial devices.
Okay. So that's a potential savings there in the long run because servicing the NFPA, all those requirements, pump testing every year.
I mean, in the big scheme of things,
Yes.
There is some savings, but it's not gonna be huge.
I, for one, am not for pulling the lieutenant's position. I think we're asking the police chief, and when he took it as the interim police chief, back when we had the issue with the fire department, we had an interim fire chief, interim assistant chief to come in and help with that fire department. When our police chief retired and our current police chief took it as an interim, we never gave such help. So he's been going nonstop in my eyes with everything that's going on. And I'm afraid if we keep going down this road and he doesn't have the help that he needs so he can go get some rest and spend some time with his family. I think we're gonna burn him out. And that's gonna be a bigger loss to the city, in my eyes, than if we put a lieutenant's position in. And see, like he was just saying, maybe police sergeant or, you know, looking short, not filling a position coming in. So I'm for one, I can't get behind the police lieutenant not being filled at this time. We've talked about shortages in all departments. We still have one person that we haven't brought back yet at a full-time status. We gave her some more hours the last few meetings ago, where if you're talking about maybe helping Judy out a little bit, why couldn't we bring that longtime staffer back in a full-time role and try to help Judy out as well as other departments? You know, I think there's some good conversation there to have. I understand that we gotta do certain things, and I know this is hard and it's painful. My only other thing that I really have, I know we're with the training. Some of it's time specific, so I guess Ray, my question would be like if somebody needed training for a like a certain, not like a certification, but to keep up part of their like I know like it's not a mandatory training, but it's a training to keep up on their, say like a certification, with you know, their alphabet soup behind their name. But say that was scheduled for March or April or something, is there a way that they could still go to that even though we're cutting training out? I don't, because I think training has a value in setting us up for the future as well. Because there might be something that changes in the state or with some other things that could potentially lead to, if we didn't know about it, would hamper us from getting such things as grants or knowing what to charge, or that we can now charge for this, or that we can't charge for this anymore, or something like that. So, I mean, 23, 4 in this big budget, you know, if you cut off the zeros and stuff, it really doesn't amount to a lot.
Right, I believe training had already, probably most departments had already cut at least 10% from their training budgets. And this third time back through after the last meeting, after the tentative budget that came after that, it really wasn't satisfactory. We were getting looked for more. We asked department heads to basically eliminate anything that wasn't essential training, essential for them to perform their duties of the job. I agree completely that, you know, training, non-essential training is valuable too. It's not a luxury but we were looking for anywhere to save. So
I just think investing in our staff.
I agree.
I think as bad as it sounds, sometimes the best thing to do when you're working shorthanded is to go away for training for a couple of days and come back and be refreshed a little bit, even though you're doing something for the city. You're away, but you're away out of that element for a little bit. I mean, we're working our staff hard. And I'm the first one to sit here and say, I don't like the budget. I don't like to look at it 2.5%, 3%. I don't like the 10% to 10%. I'm the one sitting there saying, man, where can we cut? Where can we cut? I'm not sure we got anywhere to cut anymore. And we're not going to hamper operations or morale like that. So it's just, I know it's hard. It's very hard.
I just got, and like I said in the beginning, nothing would be on the budget if it wasn't important and had value. And anything cuts are hard, but what I'm saying is you can pay for it now or pay for it later. And so you can choose not to cut things now because it's hard to do, and face the fact that in a year from now or 2 years from now, you may have to cut lettuce highway. You may have to cut, you know, the other things that are very important. You may have to reduce the scale of the transit hub and the parking garage renovation. These are, you know, you may have to, these are choices to make, and they're all painful. I'm just pointing out what we are.
Oh, I know, I'm just,
Mark?
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm with you, Scott. Actually, I would definitely advocate for community development to have assistance. I think going into this next year, it's going to be huge that we're able to identify every grant that we can find and be able to administer those grants. So I would absolutely advocate for that, but also advocate for the lieutenant's position. I think that, to me, both of these are no-brainers. There are two items that have been listed here that I also advocate for, which are both about winter weather, the ice and the skid steer treads. The weather is warming. We're dealing with climate change. We're likely to see less snow. We're likely to see more mixed precipitation. We're likely to see more dangerous driving because of that. And so I know that we can move from one line to another, but I would say let's not. However, everything else, we're looking at, Jenny, I believe your numbers. I think we're going to get to where you think we're going to go. And that means that we get into the middle part of the year or earlier, we'll be able to identify the trends and we'll be able to re-examine some of these various line items that we're looking at, not cutting right now, but tabling essentially right now. So I would advocate for that. The other thing, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but I had asked that we might consider the idea of the vacancy rate reduction that the county is mulling currently. They're looking at 5%. I suggested we might look at 1%, as that would make a difference to what our bottom line is in terms of what we're actually thinking to cut. And I don't know if we've had an opportunity to look at what that number is, but I'd like it to be something that the council has an opportunity to see.
I did,
I
yeah, I did research it. Joe did a report for me today going back to 2011. I'm not able to report to you on the number of employees that were vacant as far as the count, but what we did is we looked at the adopted budget compared to the actual expenditure for the year, and we took all categories. We took full-time, part-time, overtime to come up with a total. They varied tremendously from year to year, depending on how many vacancies we have. As you know, when there's police vacancies, they're one of the most expensive employees that the city has. And if there's 3 vacancies a year, that can add up to a lot of money. So it skews the percentages from year to year. But if you go to recent years, I go back to 2018, the difference, we had saved a little over $109,000 in payroll. This is just salaries. This doesn't affect the fringe benefits. 109,000, so that was a 1.78% difference. 2019, we had saved a little over 92,000, close to 93,000. That was a 1.48%. One of our highest years goes back to 2012, where we saved over 436,000. Again, I would, when I got down into the detail, most of that is going to be police vacancies. 2013, we saved like 240,000. That was a 4% variance. 2014 was 137, which was a little over 2%. 2015 was 105, which was 1.83%. So what I would look at is more 18 and 19 because they're more recent. 2020, that was a large savings because we had so many public safety vacancies. So I really wouldn't want to go with that number. Right now, the general fund's total wage budget is at, which includes, just so you know, the tentative budget includes the full year for the lieutenant and the full year for Judy's assistant. That's a little over 6.7 million. A 1% salary on that would be 67,000. 1.5% would be 101,000. 2% would be 135,000. And I know that I want to present this option to you. I personally don't like to short the personnel budget. I like to show you and the public what it fully costs to staff all approved positions. And for example, last year, we were able to hire the extra police officers to send the academy because we did have the full budget there for the full staff. I would just like you to take that into consideration if you do direct me to book a vacancy rate. Now, what I quoted you on the percentages was just the dollars for wages, not for the additional FICA and or retirement that would go along with that.
And the reality, let me just wrap up with it then. The reality is that the city has never been staffed fully. So we do wind up with, in various departments, a dollar amount that is what we budgeted. And what we've actually used is less. So we wind up with a little excess, and that is typically gone back into reserves for that department, correct?
I just want to make it clear, which I wrote in my memo over the weekend. It was past practice where savings would be analyzed. Was it DPW savings? Was it public safety savings? Was it general government support savings? And those numbers would then be recommended to council to take that rounded number and put it into either the public safety reserve or the DPW reserve. I don't approach reserve adjustments that way. I look at total funds that become available and look at the reserve balances to see where the need is. Because if you have a large piece of equipment that could take a large percentage of the reserve out, I don't try to put it into silos. I try to look at the full chessboard to figure out where the most need is, and that is why when I recommended the $757,000 to go into reserves, it is because those are the areas which I think are needed. And I believe that the memo that I sent over the weekend fully explained why it is, in my opinion, good practice to have reserves. It supports our capital plan, and it also provides stability for our financial statements. Our investors, when we go to issue bonds, the investors will look at those financial statements and.
My last word on this is, so if you were a betting person, you would bet that we would have, even though we're budgeting here, we would probably spend here and we'd have some monies left over. So when we're looking at a position that's going to be an assistant to Judy or to Chris, we can kind of keep that in our minds, that in fact we are going to see some monies come back as we always do.
I would guarantee with almost certainty that we will have vacancies during the year. What they are, I do not know. But would I suggest budgeting a vacancy rate? My personal opinion would be no, but it's the council's decision, not mine. And the reason that, because when you go from year to year, and a perfect example of it is in 2021, we budgeted the city administrator's position for a half year and also Judy's assistant for a half a year. But then when it comes to 2022, now that position is now 100%, which is basically one FTE, and it's also large dollars. So when you're going from budget to budget and you need to find a funding source, you've already limited yourself on expanding your current staff because you didn't fund the full position the year before. So what I'm concerned about vacancy rates is the accumulative effect from year to year and budget to budget. Because our goal is to have full staff. I'm sure the police chief would love to have all of his 17 or 18 officers and have the funding to be able to have those positions.
And Jenny, you and I disagree on this. I'm not going to argue it. I don't respect your opinion. But I just will say that every organization I've been part of has always budgeted for vacancy rate. I know that the county is looking in their budget, this to budget for vacancy rate. So it is common practice. Okay.
Jerry, Ginny, looking at the police lieutenant position, $131,100. Can you give us an idea what it would be if, let's say, instead of let's say we filled the lieutenant position and we left the sergeant position open into July, and also what it would be if we fill the lieutenant position the sergeant position and left an officer position open until July. What the difference, the dollar difference would be.
Sure, we could do that, and Chief, I can explain the math to you, at your convenience.
I understand, but a promotion is a promotion. That's the difference between the person that's being promoted and the salary they're getting promoted to.
No, I understand that, but what this number represents is a full person, not just the promotion, it's the full person, plus the FICA, plus the retirement, plus the health insurance, so it's a
Which
full.
they get now as a sergeant and will be promoted in the salary scale.
I understand that. I think it's important that everybody here knows if we decide to change that, what the difference would be. And I'm willing to look at changing that, but I want to see all the numbers in front of me. Now, as far as the deputy community development director, I know Judy has been working like crazy for the city, and I'm so appreciative of the work he's done. I think what we may have to do, though, I agree with what's already been said, that this is kind of desperate times. Those are desperate measures, and if we can somehow get you help other ways from the short term, and then possibly revisit it in July to give you a full-time person, I would be for that. I just don't know that we can do it now. But as far as the lieutenant position goes, I'd like to see those numbers.
I got a comment on. Let's see if anybody else. Great. Luke, you want to go first? Go ahead.
It's just to my understanding. No, I was late. I apologize. So if we were to theoretically entertain the motion that the top two positions here, the community development director, deputy, as well as the lieutenant, is approximately $200,000. Taking everything else out, this would be in addition to the approximately, if all other recommendations were taken, which is approximately $300,000, it would be approximately $360,000 would be taken out of the general fund. Is that correct?
Right now, we're at 300, a little over 330,000.
Okay.
So if you were to approve keeping in the community development deputy and the police lieutenant position and defer everything else, that would then bring the total down to 330,000 for the appropriated account balance instead of 630,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg, I just kind of, do we look at sharing, like when we say shared services, with a lot of people outside the city, do we ever look at like sharing service within the city, such as like, say with codes with the fire department, because a lot of the guys on the fire department go take codes classes. Is there a way we can use our fire department when, not saying they're not busy, but when, like, if there's something they can go out and be seen in the public and do codes inspections and stuff like that, or?
We have in the past had firefighters work part-time for the code office, as far as shared services, part of their duties, and I can't answer that right now, we have to look into that, it might be negotiation considerations with that. I think talking about the alternative for the community development director would be a shared service where we kind of sharing the code. So yeah, we should look at how we can have interdepartmental efficiencies. That's definitely something. You look at. Thanks. Sure.
These are non-union positions. Greg was talking about with code and community development now. Any other questions or comments?
What's the 68,000 and change increase on the parks? Is there a particular project or is it culmination? Parks, which go to A7110 parks, an increase of 68,555.
I think a big chunk of that is equipment capital outlay, and just literally just budgeted like a $26,000 change.
Just fine, piece of equipment.
Like it could have something to do with the field break and zero turn riding mower.
Because everything else is just like $1,000 for fuel, which makes sense because gas prices are going up. Personal services goes up quite a bit, $40,000.
That's, I believe that has to do with the allocation of the system employee. Working primarily in parks that previously have been allocated between multiple areas of public works. And multiple areas of funds.
I'm sorry, Jarvis.
And funds, he wasn't just allocated between different areas, he allocated between different funds previously. Yeah, this reflects exactly what they're saying.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, Jenny, what if I was to put out a challenge? Let's see what the move is for. I know we started the discussion, we ended the discussion last week with taking $650,000 to $700,000 out of the fund. We're now down, what I heard is to leave the two positions in somewhere around 330. What if I was to put out a challenge to get us below 300? Any way you can. Which means if the two top priorities, if the council feels that the two top priorities are those two positions, can you find a way to get us below 300 by looking at other places where you might save a buck or two and get us below 300? Those two positions. I'm not asking you to come up with that now, but or I put that up first before I give you that challenge, whether the council supports that. So,
I definitely support it. If I'm doing my math right, that's, if we accept all these other changes, that would be approximately $30,000 to $60,000 for save if we keep these two positions to get to around, if I'm right, Jenny?
I think that is they're going to 30, but it may be more.
Maybe that's, so about $30,000.
Well, one thing that we haven't talked about is when I recalculated the tentative budget and looking for the savings. In my narrative that I provided this weekend, I told you that I increased the tax levy from the 2% to 2.8%. I thought that was a compromise between the 2.5 and the 3.1. And it also adjusted the tax rate, which is what the homeowners will see on their bill. That increase will be at 2%. So I thought it was a nice compromise to actually end up at a 2% rate increase, even though it's a 2.8% levy increase.
Well, Jenny, I'm going to say if you take Mark's proposal and have a budget for a 1% vacancy rate, if you take your tax revenue up to the tax cap, you're home free with the two positions.
So are you comfortable with going to the full tax? Let me get my paper. But the challenge, Mayor, with getting it under 300, you know, I could come up with.
Personally, given where we started, given where we've been, I would like us to be below 300. But everything is based upon compromise. Personally, it's up to the council. My personal thing is I will live with the 300.
Well, we started at a little over $1 million, right?
Right.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, we were a little over $1 million, and now we're looking at possible 300,000.
Jenny, can you explain to me a little bit, I'm still a little bit confused, with the lieutenant's position at 131,000. We're not keeping, it's a boost for sergeant? So we're not adding a new sergeant, correct?
Correct. What the original request was to add a new person.
Yes.
So the number of employee count would go up. Then what the police chief suggested was taking a current employee, promoting them to sergeant, so we could have 6 sergeants and 17 officers instead of 5 sergeants and 18 officers. In the budget, there's the police officer, the police chief, in the tentative budget, there is the police chief, the police lieutenant, 6 sergeants, and 17 police officers. What we were doing with the 131,000 was actually eliminating one of those positions, so it would be one less person. That's why it adds up to the
That's fine.
130. Also, the 131,000 is a net, because what we calculated in there is if you did decide to eliminate one position, then we continued the additional stipend for the police chief. So actually, the cost of the lieutenant position is more over 140 some thousand dollars when you add up everything together. But what we can do is, you know, if I still need to do sergeant versus police officer, those costs are different. But keeping these 2 positions fully funded as they are in the tentative budget, then that would, and delaying all of the other items, I could also look for more items to delay. We can go through it again and, you know, and see if there's anything else we can find. And I can also consider a vacancy rate, Mayor, even though I don't support that, as which I've made myself clear on. But, you know, but for the time being, we could do it as long as we consider not doing it on a continuous basis. And the reason I say that is because eventually our goal is to get fully staffed and fully funded. And I just don't want it to cause an cumulative effect from one budget year to another. Because if I was to budget a 2% vacancy rate, which is about 135,000, and then all of a sudden we are at full staff by the end of the year, then I'm going to say to you, okay, we're already starting out with $135,000 increase, which is about, you know, over 3% tax levy increase.
I think we're okay with taking this 1 year at a time.
So it has an accumulation effect, which I don't support.
Am I correct that budgeting a vacancy rate works with some businesses, but it will not with other businesses?
Well, it won't work if there's any chance that you're going to have all your positions filled all year round.
Well, that's my point. I think it'll work with some businesses that do see vacancies, or they're very hard to fill the vacancies. But there's other businesses, like I think of the schools, I always go to the schools, and Oleana schools, very, very few.
Right. If you don't have a regular vacancy rate of some consequence, then the whole, you know, equation is moot. But if you do, and we have institutionally, as the county has as well, which is why they're looking at a similar thing, although a larger vacancy rate as applies to their budget, then it does make some sort of sense. Although, Ginny, yes, when you're at time.
So I mean, I would say, take the challenge and figure out how you see best and come back as a proposal to the council.
Okay.
So is there a direction as far as what to no longer consider from those list of 17 things? Are we taking?
Well, what I heard everybody say, or not everybody, but what I heard said is the things that were most important to people. And the very simple people were keeping those two positions.
Can I also just say, I feel like $3,000 for the correct tires for the
Yes.
staying in the parking lot
Yes.
seems like a really smart, like
Yes.
a no-brainer. Would anybody object to us spending
What is it?
$3,000?
The
The skid steer tracks to be able to clear the new spot.
Yeah.
That reduces the debt.
$3,000. It's just what it is.
$3,000.
I mean, I can find something else. balance for $3,000.
No, I mean,
So
it sounds like, I mean, you heard the tires, you'll probably find a way to put those in on your own because they're so small. But it sounds like what's most important for the greatest number of people, is keeping those people. So I would make it goal that those are two of the highest priority, along with the tires. And see if you can come up with a way, whether it's increasing revenue, whether it's making additional cuts or having a vacancy rate or whatever magic you can work. And see if you can meet the challenge of getting it under 300 and making those happen.
This seems like an exercise in futility because I know that you guys have scoured this thing, but I do have some questions about some of them. I do have some questions about some of the more volatile expenses. I mean, the telephone in the public safety building has gone from like practically nothing to a lot. It's not nothing, $8,255 in 2019 to $18,000, $450.
And I have put, just so you know, I have put a request into our phone company to see why the changes happened. One of them is that there were additional phone lines installed in the conversion and additional cell phones issued and things like that. So, but I've asked for the detail on that.
Okay.
And hopefully they will come back with a supportable answer.
Okay.
Those text messages you're receiving for the hotline.
Yeah, right. There's
There's a
also,
significant amount.
there's maintenance agreements in fire from $5,600 in 2019 to $15,500 in the 22 budget, which is a $5,000 increase over last year.
It has to do with the different equipments that they have purchased. And for example, I misstate these, okay? It's the automatic cots and also the heart monitors from Zoll. We have a prepayment maintenance agreement on those, and then there were additional other pieces of equipment that they have added to the ambulances that also have new maintenance agreements on them.
Okay. Treating travel meals up $3,500 in traffic control from 21 to 22.
Recertification for employees, it comes out of that code, it's when it works on traffic control, maintenance and traffic signal.
Gotcha. Okay. Animal control overtime.
That is because we have a new employee, and it's just to allow her to have also, and Chief, please jump in on this one. I understand that the animal calls that are happening are usually off hours, and they're happening more than previous activity. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if we had an animal that was brought in that was in need of transport to the ASPCA for whatever reason, we'd either have to have an officer drive it up or have the animal control officer drive it up. Given the hours that the parking enforcement animal control officer works, sometimes they don't coincide, so it would be, that's put in there more for a buffer so that we're not going over, and we have some additional flexibility to be able to provide her with some overtime, so we're not like trying to steal from other lines.
Oh, okay. The 3 additional firefighters. You guys can go on without me.
I think for Jeannie, from more my standpoint is, and granted, I'm only 180, but you know, I know you've scoured this probably hundreds of times now, but for me personally, as long as we're not eliminating the position and keeping these two, I think pretty close to comfortable with everything fine for the 30,000 to get 300.
think approximately 12,000 of that, 17 or 18,000 will be raising their tax cap to the full amount.
Okay, so it would be about 14,500 approximately, if we did that? Full amount or 2.8?
So right now it's at 2.8,
2.8.
that's 135,762. If you go to 3.16, that's 153, 169. So that could be something that council can direct us to do now. I think one of the issues I'm kind of leading up to is that by next week, the council needs to vote to approve the tentative budget either as presented, which was what we presented last week, or with changes, which is what we're discussing now. So any changes that you vote to any amendments to that tentative budget, we need to be able to have motions prepared for that meeting. So if another meeting is required between now and then, or if we can meet tonight with clear direction as to what we're cutting, I think one of those two things has to happen.
No, that's a good point. So I think the council needs to give some direction to Jenny on the tax cap. What is your direction as to how high are you willing to let her raise it?
John, if I may, one of the things that's running through my mind is hearing about the two positions. I'm guessing, based on my high intuition, that both, as Judy has brought up, she could do so much more if she had a position. Not something just woven together, but really had a position. I'm also hearing this, in a sense, stress from someone I normally expect to be extremely stoic in taking anything, saying effectiveness and efficiency without the lieutenant is going to be possibly severely affected. In any case, I think those fallings off could lead to both people doing as best they can, also burning out. And I think that the people sometimes is measured against what will these two positions do for effectiveness and efficiency versus the numbers that we're trying to, that we can always reduce numbers of some sort. But we can't make up for 6 months of lost assistance in these two areas. So that's simply, in my background, looking at the numbers can triple, and you may have a great outcome in getting down to the numbers you want, but then several months down the line, really pay a major price in terms of lost opportunities or actually people saying screw it.
I think that
Not leaving.
that message has been heard. And
That's what I'm saying, they're just getting another perspective because we've been talking about
where we're at
dollars.
now is accepting the two positions and doing
Yeah.
what's easier to say, which is reduce the numbers. So if you can give Jenny some guidance.
Yeah.
So she doesn't create a budget at 3.2 or whatever the tax cap is, and then everybody says, no, we don't want that, we want low. So if you can just give us some guidance as to how high she can go on it, it would be helpful.
Ginny, if I may, another kind of a middle of the road, what it would look like at 2.95 perhaps?
Well, at 3%, it's 145,000. Right now, the difference that's in the tentative budget versus what we can max it out at is 18,000.
Okay.
And but when I went to the 2.8, I was trying to stay at the 2% that we had discussed before, but ended up doing that in the rate and instead of the actual levy itself. So let me look at the updated rate. I think I provided here. If we were to go up to the full levy, it would be a 2.356% increase in the rate. Even though it's a 3.16% in the levy, it will turn into a 2.35% in the rate.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear that. You said I couldn't hear.
Yes, on the handout from, if we were to go up to the full tax cap, which is a 3.16% levy increase, it would turn into a 2.36 rate increase.
So I'm not hearing anybody giving any direction, so let me try this.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So given the fact that you and Greg and others have worked extremely hard in cutting more than $700,000, I'm in favor of going to the full tax cap rate of 3.16%. And keeping the two positions to make that happen. I'm like fellow council members that kind of get down into the weeds and look at things. You guys are doing this on an everyday basis. I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate the fact that you've worked hard and got $700,000. It was hard to fathom that we were going to borrow over $1 million from our unrestricted fund balance to make this happen. So thank you for working hard on that. But it also makes a strong call for all of us here on council that we need to look for new revenue streams. And so Greg has identified the stormwater. I think we need to move forward on the paid parking. And we need to look at other revenue streams to make this happen. And they need our help. That's what we're here for also, is to help them provide the fiscally responsibility of the taxpayers' money. So look forward to working with you guys in the next 6 months to make this happen. I know we have a lot of work in front of us.
Does anybody object to the 3.16? Does anybody object to the 3.16?
I do, actually. As you know, I was advocating for the 2.5. I appreciate the split of the 2.8. You've done the homework on that. We're talking about being able to reach a figure of $300,000 out of the security reserve fund. I'm comfortable with that. And so I'm comfortable with the 2.8 that you've done the work on.
Do we have, I think since Len made a proposal, how many people object to it? We have 3 or less people object to it, then the majority supports it. How many people object to going to the 3.8?
Can I ask a question
first? Sure.
If we only go to the 2.8, does that give us those two positions?
She'll come up with other cuts.
She's gonna have to cut something out.
She's gonna come up, she's gonna make those positions happen. It's how much does she have to cut through?
Going up to the 3.19 is an extra 17,000, so it would be 13,000 approximately.
So to clarify though, we're not talking about completely cuts, we're talking about deferring some things till July and we can look at where we're in July. Right? So, I'm comfortable at 2.8 because we can defer to July and see where we're at. We can't roll back our taxes in July.
That's right.
And so I'd rather 2.8 is a comfortable number for me, with the idea that we will take a look at things in July the way it's been proposed, and then figure and move on. So that's where I'm comfortable at. With the difference of taxpayers taking a hit, or do we try to kind of rein it in for 6 months, and hope that our finances and our taxes kind of turn around and we're able to move it in the direction in July.
What's the? Because this all carries over from, like, if we did 3% this year, that line there, that's where we start every year from there, right? You were saying something like in the thing, that one thing that you gave us that, like, say it raises 125,000, that roll, next one's 125, and then the 2%. Because we never hit the 10%.
You're exactly right. If you take an extra 20,000 this year, it means next year, you have that 20,000 plus next year's tax. You have that $20,000 forever. Right. So if you take an extra 18,000 this year, you have in 10 years, you're taking an extra 180,000.
So I mean, okay. Right. Just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
So we have two proposals on the table, 2.8 and 3.16, correct? Well, why don't you- how many people support 3.16? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. How many support 2.8? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2.8 it is.
May I make a suggestion? What I will do is,
Wait before we have.
Yeah, I was just wondering, somebody didn't
You
You didn't count me, my hand was only this.
Yeah, don't mean
So that's
automatic.
4-4.
No, it's five.
Oh, 5,
Yeah,
okay, all right,
you're good, you're good.
okay.
You don't have to cast a time vote.
so what,
I'm not contesting.
so what I can do is, I will look to, I will go through again, I will look at, see if any other new ideas come up. I will email all of the council members and the mayor before next Tuesday's meeting, to prepare you for the suggestions of what else to defer for the July 1st cuts. And that will also keep in at full year, the community development director assistant position and the lieutenant position. And bring the allocated fund balance from unrestricted under $300,000. So that is my challenge. And that I will get that out to you.
Great, thank you, Jim.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? With those things, without any additional cuts, we're at 330,000?
I'm sorry, your question again, yes.
Without you finding anything else to cut, we're at 330,000?
We're at 330,000, yes.
If there's nothing else, let me say, thank you. I think we've come a long way. We've started out close to $1 million, we're at 300,000. We'd rather be at 0, I'd rather be at 0, but I think we've made a lot of progress with discussion. And, thank you, I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank all of you.
If I may just make a quick statement, I just thank the department that you're making the cases that make tonight, helped out a lot and understand.
Thank you for hearing us.
Veterans Day.
You want to say something about it?
Just want to remind the council that you're invited to Demos Park, 11 a.m. on Veterans Day. They'll recognize James and I will be doing his speech because he hasn't, whatever the year that he's been mayor.
Every year.
Oh,
Not every other year.
I didn't have it every other.
Glenn, you said 11?
Love.
First